I returned from 3 months in Florida to find my sanctuary destroyed. My garage, the place where I kept my memories and my most prized possession, was nothing but a pile of brick and splintered wood. My son's wife stood amidst the rubble, dusting off her hands with a smile that did not reach her eyes. She told me they were building a guest house for me because the main house was too much for a man my age to handle. When I asked about my car, the 1967 Shelby Mustang I had spent a decade restoring, she laughed lightly and said she had done me a favor by selling that old piece of junk. She thought she was talking to a senile old man who would be grateful for her scraps. She had no idea she had just declared war on a man who made his fortune in the cutthroat world of Chicago construction. She never expected the judge to take my side, and she certainly never expected to leave the courtroom in handcuffs. Before I tell you how I reclaimed my dignity and destroyed their greed, let me know in the comments if you have ever had family mistake your kindness for weakness. Hit like and subscribe if you believe respect is earned, not given. The humidity of Florida was still clinging to my skin when the taxi turned onto Elm Street. I was looking forward to the silence of my home. I was looking forward to the smell of oil and old leather in my garage. I was Ray Coleman, 71 years old, retired and tired. I had spent 40 years pouring concrete and negotiating contracts that would make lesser men crumble, and now all I wanted was my routine. But as the taxi slowed down in front of the two-story colonial I had bought 20 years ago, the peace I craved was shattered by the violent rattle of a jackhammer. I blinked, thinking the heat had messed with my vision. But the noise was real. Dust billowed into the air, coating the pristine oak trees in a layer of gray filth. My eyes scanned the property, trying to make sense of the chaos. The driveway was cracked. A dumpster overflowed with debris. And there, where my detached garage had stood since 1980, was a gaping hole in the earth. My sanctuary. My workshop. Gone. "Stop here," I told the driver, my voice sounding calm despite the fire igniting in my chest. I paid him and stepped out onto the sidewalk. My knees, worn down from years of climbing scaffolding, ached as I walked up the driveway. The construction crew didn't pay me any mind. They were just guys doing a job digging trenches for a foundation that looked suspiciously small. "Hey!" I shouted over the noise of the machinery. "Who is the foreman here?" Before any of the workers could answer, the front door of the main house opened. Brittany stepped out. My daughter-in-law looked like she had just stepped out of a catalog, wearing white linen pants that had no business being near a construction site. She shielded her eyes from the sun and smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't a smile of welcome. It was the tight, patronizing smile a nurse gives a patient who has wandered out of his room. "Dad," she called out, her voice sickly sweet. "You are back early. We didn't expect you until Sunday." I ignored the pleasantries. I pointed a trembling finger at the crater in my yard. "Brittany, what is this? Where is my garage?" She walked down the porch steps, careful not to get dust on her sandals. "Oh, that," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "We wanted it to be a surprise. Derek and I talked about it, and we decided it was time to make some changes. With the baby coming, we need the extra room in the main house, so we are building you a customized ADU. What I asked the acronym foreign to my tongue. An accessory dwelling unit," she explained, speaking slowly as if I were a child. "A guest house, Ray. It will be perfect for you. It is cozy, low maintenance, and right here in the backyard so we can keep an eye on you. You know, at your age, maintaining a big house is a burden. We are just helping you downsize." I looked at the hole in the ground. I had been a contractor for 40 years. I knew measurements by eye. That foundation wasn't for a guest house. It was for a glorified shed. They weren't building me a home. They were building me a kennel. I looked past her to the front door. My son Derek was standing behind the screen door. He didn't come out. He just stood there, a shadow in his own home, hiding behind his wife's ambition. Shame burned in my gut, but I pushed it down. I turned back to Brittany. "I did not ask for a guest house," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "And I did not authorize you to tear down my property. But right now, I don't care about the bricks. I care about what was inside. Where is my car, Brittany? Where is the Mustang?" For a split second, her mask slipped. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face, but she smoothed it over instantly. "Oh, that old thing," she said with a laugh. "Ray, honestly, it was just taking up space. It was a safety hazard. Oil leaking everywhere, rusting away. Since we tore down the garage, we had nowhere to put it." My heart hammered against my ribs. That car was a 1967 Shelby GT 500. It wasn't just a car. It was the first thing I bought when my business took off. It was the project my late wife and I worked on weekends before the cancer took her. It was the legacy I planned to leave to my grandchild. Where is it? I repeated, stepping closer. I handled it, she said, puffing out her chest. I found a buyer yesterday. He took it off our hands this morning. You should be happy, Ray. I managed to get $15,000 for it. The world stopped spinning. $15,000. That car was worth $250,000 in its current condition. She had sold a piece of automotive history for the price of a used sedan. $15,000, I whispered, feeling the blood drain from my face. Cash, she said proudly. It is going to pay for the foundation of your new little house. See? It all worked out. We are recycling your clutter into your future. Clutter. She called my life's work clutter. I looked at Derek again. He looked away. He knew what that car meant to me, and he let her sell it for scraps. I did not scream. I wanted to. I wanted to roar until the window shattered, but I learned a long time ago that in the boardroom and on the streets, the man who yells loses. The man who stays quiet is the one who is planning. I took a deep breath, inhaling the dust of my demolished sanctuary. Get out of my way, I said. I am going inside. I need to sit down. I walked past her up the steps to the house I had paid for, the house I let them live in rent-free so they could save money. I reached for the handle and shoved my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I jiggled it, thinking maybe the dust had jammed the mechanism, but it was smooth resistant. The wrong key. I turned around. Brittany was standing at the bottom of the stairs, her arms crossed. Oh, right, she said, no longer smiling. We changed the locks last week. Security reasons. There have been some break-ins in the neighborhood, and you know how you are with keys, Ray. You are always misplacing them. We didn't want to take the risk. Open the door, Brittany, I said. I can't right now, she replied, checking her watch. The house is a mess. We are painting the nursery. The fumes are terrible. It is not good for your lungs. Besides, we haven't made a copy of the new key for you yet. So what am I supposed to do? I asked, looking at my suitcase, sitting lonely on the porch. Sleep on the lawn. Don't be dramatic, she said, pulling a slip of paper from her pocket. I booked you a room at the Motel 6 off the highway, just for a few weeks until your unit is finished. It is better this way. You will have your independence and we will have our privacy to get ready for the baby. It is a win-win. I looked at the piece of paper she was holding out to me. She wasn't asking. She was telling. This wasn't a surprise renovation. This was an eviction. This was a hostile takeover of my life orchestrated by the woman my son married and enabled by the coward I raised. I looked at Derek one last time. Son, I called out. Are you going to let your father sleep in a motel? Derek opened the door a crack. I am sorry, Dad. He mumbled, his voice barely audible over the construction noise. Brittany thinks it is best, just for a while, until you get settled in the back. It is just downsizing, Dad. Everyone does it. He closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking into place echoed like a gunshot. I looked down at Brittany. She was still holding the paper, a look of triumph in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought she had outsmarted the old bricklayer. She saw a man with gray hair and a cane and assumed I was helpless. She didn't know that I still had the mind that navigated the union strikes of '85. She didn't know that I had contacts in this city that went deeper than the foundations of this house. I didn't take the paper. I picked up my suitcase. You sold my car, I said, my voice steady. You demolished my garage, and you locked me out of my home. I am helping you, she snapped, losing her patience. You are ungrateful. Most families would put you in a home. We are building you one. I walked down the stairs, past her, past the workers who had stopped digging to watch the drama. I walked to the curb and hailed a passing taxi. Where to, the driver asked as I threw my bag in the back. Take me to the Regency downtown, I said. That is a 5-star hotel, buddy, the driver said, looking at my dusty clothes. It is expensive. I have the money, I said, looking back at my house. My daughter-in-law just made the most expensive mistake of her life, and I am going to make sure she gets the bill. As the taxi pulled away, I took my phone out of my pocket. I didn't call the motel. I didn't call Derek. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. Marcus, I said when the voice on the other end answered. It is Ray. Dust off your suit. We have work to do. I sat back in the seat watching the neighborhood I had lived in for 20 years fade into the distance. Brittany said she wanted to help me downsize. Fine, I would downsize. I would downsize her lifestyle, her bank account, and her arrogance until there was nothing left but the truth. She wanted a war. She was about to get a master class. The taxi had barely turned the corner when the cold realization hit me like a physical blow. I was so angry, so blinded by the rage of seeing my garage destroyed that I had almost walked away without the one thing I needed to destroy them: my deed. The original property deed, my insurance policies, and the bank records for the accounts I had kept separate from the joint household expenses. They were all sitting in the fireproof safe bolted to the floor of my home office closet. If Brittany was bold enough to bulldoze my garage and sell my car, she would not hesitate to drill into that safe. I could not let her get her hands on those papers. If she did, she would know exactly how much I was worth, and she would drain me dry before I could even file a lawsuit. "Turn around," I told the driver. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, confused. "I thought you wanted to go to the Regency. I forgot something I said," my voice hard. "Take me back." When the taxi pulled up to the curb again, the construction crew had stopped working for the day. The silence on the street was eerie. My house. The house I had bought with sweat and blood stood there like a fortress I was no longer allowed to enter. I walked up the driveway, past the hole in the ground that used to be my sanctuary. I went straight to the front door, but then I remembered. The locks. She had changed them. I went around the back. The sliding glass door to the patio was usually locked, but the latch was old and finicky. I jiggled it. Locked tight. I tried the kitchen window. Locked. She had secured the perimeter like she was preparing for a siege. She knew I would come back. I stood on the patio looking through the glass at my own living room. I could see the furniture I had paid for. I could see the photos on the mantel. It was maddening. I was being treated like a criminal at my own address. I looked around for a rock, a brick, anything. I grabbed a heavy garden stone from the flower bed. I didn't want to break my own house, but she had left me no choice. I wrapped my jacket around my hand, took a deep breath, and smashed the glass of the small side window next to the back door. The sound was loud, a sharp crash that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. I reached in, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened the door. The alarm started blaring instantly, a high-pitched shriek that pierced my eardrums. I knew the code. I punched it into the keypad by the back door. Silence. I didn't waste a second. I moved as fast as my bad knees would allow, heading straight for the hallway that led to my office. But I didn't make it. Freeze, a voice screamed from the top of the stairs. I looked up. Brittany was standing there, phone in hand. She wasn't scared. She was smiling, a cold, predatory smile. "Get out of my house, Ray," she said, her voice calm despite the situation. "This is my house," I roared, stepping toward the stairs. "I am getting my papers, and then I am leaving." She didn't try to stop me. She just lifted the phone to her ear. "Yes, 911. Please hurry. He has broken in. He is violent. I am terrified. He has a weapon." I stopped dead in my tracks. A weapon. I was holding nothing but my car keys. "Brittany, stop this," I said, lowering my voice. "You are going to get someone hurt." She ignored me, continuing her performance for the operator. "Please, my husband is trying to hold him back, but he is out of control. He is confused. He doesn't know where he is." I realized then what she was doing. She wasn't just calling the cops on an intruder. She was setting the stage. She was painting the picture of a dangerous, senile old man. I rushed to my office. I had maybe 3 minutes before the police arrived. I threw open the closet door. My clothes were pushed to the side. I looked down at the floor where my safe should have been. It was gone. There was just a rectangular indentation in the carpet and 4 holes where the bolts had been unscrewed. I felt the blood rush to my head. She had already moved it. She was steps ahead of me. I heard sirens in the distance. They were getting louder. I turned around to leave, to get out before things got worse. But Derek was standing in the doorway of the office. He looked pale, sweating. "Where is the safe, Derek?" I asked, stepping toward him. He flinched. "Mom took it," he whispered. "She moved it to a storage unit yesterday." "Dad, please just go. The police are coming. She told them you threatened her." "You are letting her do this?" I asked, grabbing his shoulders. "You are letting her frame your own father." Derek looked down at his feet. "She is doing it for us, Dad. For the baby. We need the money. You have so much and you never share. You just sit on it." I let go of him as if he burned me. Never share. I paid for his college. I paid for his wedding. I bought this house. The front door burst open. Police shouted a voice. "Come out with your hands up." I walked into the living room, my hands raised. 2 officers were there, guns drawn. One was young, nervous. The other was older, tired-looking. "Officer," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I am Raymond Coleman. I own this house." "Get on your knees," the younger one shouted. "I can't," I said calmly. "My knees are bad. I am 71 years old. I am not a threat." The older officer signaled his partner to lower his weapon. He looked at me, then at the broken glass on the floor. "Sir, we got a call about a break-in and a violent disturbance." "It is my house," I repeated. "My son and his wife changed the locks illegally. I came to retrieve my personal documents." Brittany came running down the stairs, then tears streaming down her face. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. "Oh, thank God you are here," she sobbed, rushing to the older officer but staying behind him for protection. He smashed the window. He was screaming at us. I thought he was going to hit me. "That is a lie," I said. "Officer, please," Brittany continued, her voice trembling. "You have to understand. My father-in-law, he is not well. He has been struggling with dementia for months. He gets confused, he gets aggressive. He forgets that he doesn't live here anymore." I stared at her. "Doesn't live here anymore. I have lived here for 20 years, I said, my voice rising. "Check the deed. Check my ID. Brittany reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to the officer with a shaking hand. "We tried to keep him here as long as we could, but he became too much to handle. We found a nice facility for him, but he refuses to go. He thinks he still runs everything. Look, this is a power of attorney. He signed it 6 months ago when his condition started to deteriorate. It gives us full control over his assets and his living arrangements. He is not capable of making decisions for himself, officer. He is a danger to himself and others." The officer took the paper. He unfolded it and scanned the legal jargon. I watched his eyes move down the page. I saw his expression soften toward her. I stepped closer. "Let me see that," I demanded. "I never signed a power of attorney." The officer held the paper up so I could see the bottom. There on the signature line was my name, Raymond Coleman. It was my handwriting, a little shaky, a little weak, but definitely mine. I stared at it, my mind racing. When did I sign this? I never signed legal papers for her. I never gave her power. And then it hit me. The memory washed over me like ice water. 6 months ago, I was in the hospital. My appendix had burst. I was septic. I was on high-dose morphine for the pain in and out of consciousness. Brittany had been there every day playing the doting daughter-in-law. I remembered her voice soft and soothing through the fog of painkillers. "Dad, you need to sign these forms. It is just for the insurance. The hospital needs approval to do the surgery. Just sign here and here." She had held the clipboard. She had held the pen. She had turned the pages for me because I was too weak to lift my arms. I had trusted her. I had signed where she pointed, thinking I was authorizing a life-saving surgery. I didn't read the fine print. I didn't see that buried in the stack of medical consent forms was a durable power of attorney granting her full control over my life if I became incapacitated. And the language. I squinted at the paper in the officer's hand. It was drafted broadly. It didn't require a doctor to declare me incompetent. It just required her to say I was. "You tricked me," I whispered, looking from the paper to her face. "You made me sign that when I was on morphine." Brittany looked at the officer with sad, pitying eyes. "See? He is paranoid. He thinks everyone is tricking him. It is part of the disease. We are just trying to protect him." The older officer sighed. He folded the paper and handed it back to Brittany. He looked at me not with anger, but with sympathy. And that was worse. He believed her. He saw a confused, sick old man. "Mr. Coleman," the officer said gently, "based on this document, your daughter-in-law has the legal right to manage this property. If she says you cannot be here, you have to leave." "This is my home," I said, feeling the desperation rising in my throat. "I paid for every brick." "I understand that, sir," the officer said. "But legally she is in charge right now. We don't want to arrest you for trespassing or destruction of property, but you need to go. Do you have somewhere else to stay?" I looked at Derek. He was standing by the kitchen island, his head hung low. He couldn't even look me in the eye. He knew the truth. He knew I was sane. He knew I was sharp. But he was letting her bury me alive because he was too weak to stand up to her. "Derek," I said, my voice cutting through the room. Tell them I am fine. Tell them how she got that signature." Derek looked up. His eyes were wet. He looked at me, then he looked at Brittany. She didn't say a word. She just stared at him, a silent challenge in her eyes. "I am sorry, Dad," Derek said, his voice cracking. You You haven't been yourself lately. Maybe it is better if you go to the hotel, just for tonight. The betrayal was physical. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. My own son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the man I bailed out of debt 3 times. He had just sold me out. The officer put a hand on my shoulder. Come on, Mr. Coleman. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. I will drive you to the hotel. I shrugged his hand off. I can walk, I said. I looked at Brittany. She was hugging herself, looking relieved, looking like the victim. But I saw the smirk she tried to hide. She thought it was over. She thought the piece of paper was her golden ticket. I turned to Derek. I walked right up to him. The police tensed, but I didn't raise my hand. I just looked him dead in the eye. You just chose a side, son, I said, my voice low and steady, a rumble of thunder before the storm. And you chose wrong. When the dust settles, don't come knocking on my door. You are dead to me. I turned and walked out the front door, past the broken glass, past the lie of my life. The officer followed me to the curb. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. Tears were for people who had hope. I didn't have hope anymore. I had a plan. As I climbed into the back of the squad car for a ride to the hotel, I wasn't thinking about the house. I wasn't thinking about the car. I was thinking about the phone call I was going to make to the Cayman Islands. Brittany wanted to play the legal game. She wanted to use documents and signatures. Fine. I knew that game. I invented that game. She had just used a forged sword to strike a dragon. She had no idea she was about to get burned. The neon sign of the motel flickered with a buzzing sound that felt like a drill boring into my skull. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale cigarette smoke, a scent that clung to the cheap polyester bedspread. I sat on the edge of the mattress, my suitcase unopened on the floor. 3 hours ago, I was standing in the foyer of a home I had spent 20 years building. Now I was staring at a water stain on the ceiling of a roadside motel, listening to the sound of trucks thundering down the interstate. They thought this would break me. Brittany thought that by stripping me of my keys and my car, she would strip me of my will. She saw an old man and assumed I would curl up and fade away. But as I sat there in the dim light, I didn't feel weak. I felt the cold, hard resolve that had gotten me through Vietnam and through the ruthless world of Chicago real estate. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my flip phone. It was old like me, but it was secure. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice. Washington, a gruff voice answered. Marcus, I said. It is Ray. There was a pause, heavy with the weight of years. Ray Coleman, I haven't heard that voice since the funeral. I thought you were retired in Florida, soaking up the sun and forgetting about us working stiffs. I was, I said, but I came home early. And it seems I don't have a home anymore. I told him everything. I told him about the garage, the locks, the fake power of attorney, and the police officer who looked at me with pity instead of respect. Marcus listened in silence. He was the best lawyer I had ever known, a man who could find a loophole in the 10 Commandments if he had to. We had come up together from the same neighborhood. We knew what it meant to fight for every inch. When I finished, the silence on the line was dangerous. So Marcus said finally, his voice low, "She forged your signature. She kicked you out. And she thinks she has won." That is the short version, I said. But right now, Marcus, I need you to find something for me. She sold the Mustang. The Shelby, Marcus asked, his tone sharpening. The 67. Yes, she said she got $15,000 for it. $15,000, Marcus scoffed. That car is worth $250,000 in parts alone. Who did she sell it to? That is what I need to find out, I said. I am going to the place she mentioned, a scrapyard on the south side. But I need you to dig into her finances. Find out why she needed cash so fast that she would sell a diamond for the price of glass. Consider it done, Marcus said. Ray, don't do anything stupid. I am not going to do anything stupid, Marcus, I said, standing up and grabbing my jacket. I am going to do something necessary. I hung up and walked out into the humid night. I didn't call a taxi this time. I walked 2 miles to the nearest bus stop. I needed the movement. I needed to feel the pavement under my feet to remind myself that I was still standing. The scrapyard was located in an industrial wasteland surrounded by chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Mountains of crushed metal rose against the night sky like twisted skeletons. The sign above the gate read, "Miller's Auto Recycling and Peeling Paint." The gate was locked, but the lights were on in the small office trailer. I banged on the metal door. A moment later, a man appeared. He was huge, wiping grease from his hands with a dirty rag. He looked me up and down, seeing an old black man in a dusty suit. "We are closed, Pops," he grunted. "Come back in the morning." "I am not here to sell," I said, keeping my voice even. "I am here about a car you bought yesterday. A 1967 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500, night mist blue." The man stopped wiping his hands. His eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" "I am the owner," I said. He laughed, a dry, rasping sound. The owner was a lady, blonde, real nervous, talked a mile a minute, said the car belonged to her father-in-law who passed away and she just wanted it gone, said it was bad memories. "Passed away," I repeated, feeling the anger coil in my stomach like a snake. "Is that what she said?" "Look, buddy," the man said, stepping back. "I run a legitimate business. I have the title, I have the bill of sale. Everything is legal." "Let me see the bill of sale," I said. He hesitated, then shrugged. He walked into the trailer and came back a minute later with a piece of paper. He pressed it against the glass of the window. I looked at the scribbled handwriting. It was Brittany's, and then I looked at the price. $12,000. "She told me 15, I whispered. 15. The man laughed again. "She asked for 15. I told her I had 12 in cash on hand. She didn't even haggle. She grabbed the cash so fast I thought she was going to burn her fingers. She acted like the cops were chasing her. $12,000. She had sold my legacy, my heart, for $12,000. "Where's the car?" I asked. "Gone," the man said, a smirk playing on his lips. I knew what I had. As soon as she drove off, I made a call. Sold it 2 hours later. "To who?" "I can't tell you that, Pops. Client confidentiality." I reached into my pocket. I didn't have much cash left, but I had enough. I pulled out $500 in hundreds. I pressed them against the glass. "I am not the police," I said. "And I am not trying to get the car back from you. I just need to know where it is. If that car gets chopped up for parts, a piece of history dies. You know cars. You know what that machine was." The man looked at the money. He looked at my face. He saw the desperation, but he also saw the respect for the machine. He opened the door and took the money. "A guy named Sterling," he muttered. "Private collector out in the suburbs, big-time guy. He doesn't chop them. He keeps them in a climate-controlled vault." I nodded. "Thank you." As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. He worked fast. It was a screenshot of a credit card statement. I looked at the image, squinting in the dim light of the scrapyard. It was a joint account Brittany had opened in Derek's name, one I didn't know about. The balance was maxed out at $50,000. But it wasn't expenses for the baby. It wasn't medical bills. It was Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, Four Seasons Resort in Cabo. I scrolled down to the payment history. Yesterday, a cash deposit was made. $11,500. She didn't sell my car to build me a house. She didn't sell it to help the family. She sold it because she was drowning in debt from her own vanity, and the interest rates were about to eat her alive. She kept $500 for herself and put the rest on the card to stop the collections calls. She traded my memories for a temporary fix to her spending addiction. I stood there in the dirt, surrounded by broken machines, and I felt a cold clarity wash over me. This wasn't just disrespect. This was fraud. This was theft. And she had done it with such arrogance, such stupidity, that she had handed me the weapon to destroy her. I called a taxi to take me to the suburbs. I needed to see Sterling. The house was a mansion set back from the road behind iron gates. I pressed the intercom. "Who is it?" a voice asked. "My name is Ray Coleman," I said. "You bought a Shelby GT500 today. I am the man who restored it." The gates opened. I found the car in a garage that looked more like a museum. It was parked between a Ferrari and a vintage Jaguar. It was gleaming under the fluorescent lights. My car, my girl. She looked safe. Mr. Sterling came out. He was a man in his 50s wearing a silk robe. He looked nervous when he saw me. "Mr. Coleman," he said, "look, I bought this fair and square. The title, I know I cut him off. I am not here to take it. Not yet." I walked over to the Mustang. I ran my hand along the fender. I could feel every hour I had spent sanding it, every drop of sweat. "How much did you pay for it?" I asked. Sterling hesitated. $250,000, he said quietly. "It is a fair market price. The restoration is impeccable." $250,000. Brittany sold it for 12. The gap between those two numbers was enough to send her to prison for grand larceny. The difference in value proved she had no concept of what she was doing, no right to be the executor of my estate. "Mr. Sterling," I said, turning to him, "I need you to do me a favor." He looked wary. "What kind of favor?" "Keep it," I said. "Don't sell it. Don't drive it. Just keep it right here. Cover it up." "You don't want to buy it back?" he asked, confused. "Oh, I will," I said, "but not today. Right now, that car isn't just a vehicle. It is a mousetrap, and the mouse has already taken the cheese." I walked out of the garage, leaving my heart behind, but carrying a new sense of purpose. Brittany thought she had cleaned up a mess. She thought she had liquidated a liability. She had no idea that she had just committed a felony that carried a mandatory prison sentence. I went back to the motel room. I laid down on the lumpy mattress, staring at the water stain. I didn't sleep. I lay there and imagined the look on Brittany's face when the trap snapped shut. She wanted to play the grieving daughter-in-law. She wanted to play the victim. Fine. I would let her play her part. I would let her think she was safe. I would let her think the old man was defeated. Because when I finally stood up, when I finally revealed the truth, the fall would be so much harder. She had started a fire to burn me out. She didn't know I was the one who controlled the wind. I stood in front of the door I had been kicked out of just 24 hours earlier. This time I didn't bang on the wood or shout about my rights. I hunched my shoulders. I let my hand tremble as I reached for the doorbell. I forced my eyes to look watery and confused. If Brittany wanted a senile old man, I was going to give her a performance that would win an Academy Award. When the door opened, Brittany didn't even hide her annoyance. She was holding a paint roller and her hair was tied back in a messy bun. "What do you want now, Ray?" She sighed, blocking the entrance with her body. "I thought the police made it clear." "I am sorry," I mumbled, looking down at my shoes. "I got confused, Brittany. The hotel, the lights were too bright. I couldn't find the bathroom. I got scared. I just want to come home. Please. I will sign whatever you want. Just let me sleep in my own house." She looked at me, scanning my face for any sign of the defiance I had shown yesterday. But all she saw was a broken old man clutching a plastic bag of toiletries. Her expression softened, not with kindness, but with victory. She stepped back and opened the door. "Fine," she said. "But we have rules now. If you are going to stay here until the guest house is built, you do exactly what I say. No more outbursts. No more wandering off." I nodded eagerly, shuffling inside. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you, Brittany." She led me not to my bedroom upstairs, but to the door under the staircase. "The basement. Your room is occupied by the nursery furniture we are assembling," she lied effortlessly. "The guest room is full of boxes. This is the only space available. It is temporary, Ray. Just until the construction is done." She opened the door. The smell hit me first, a mix of damp earth, old cardboard, and neglect. The basement wasn't finished. It was a concrete box with a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the corner, she had set up a folding cot and a thin blanket. It wasn't a room for a father. It was a cell for a prisoner. "It is nice," I lied, my voice shaking. "It is quiet," she corrected. "You need quiet. Now give me your phone." I clutched the old flip phone in my pocket. My lifeline. My connection to Marcus. Why, I asked, letting a note of panic enter my voice. "Because you are calling people and talking nonsense," she said, holding out her hand. "You called a scrapyard yesterday. You called a taxi. You are not capable of managing your own communication right now. It is for your own good. I will keep it safe." I hesitated for a long second, making sure she saw the struggle. Then with a trembling hand, I pulled out the phone and placed it in her palm. "Good," she said, slipping it into her pocket. "And your pills, the heart medication, the blood thinners. I need those," I said. "And you will get them," she replied, "but I will dispense them. You took a double dose last week, Ray. You don't remember, but you did. I can't trust you with medication anymore. I hadn't taken a double dose. I had never missed a dose in 10 years. But I nodded submissively. I handed over the pill bottles. I was now unarmed, cut off from the world, and dependent on her for my very survival. She smiled, patted my cheek with a condescending tap, and turned to leave. "Get some rest. I will bring you dinner later." The door clicked shut. I heard the lock turn from the outside. I stood in the darkness of the basement, listening to her footsteps fade away. I waited 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then I straightened my back. The trembling in my hands stopped. The confused look vanished from my eyes. I sat down on the cot, staring at the concrete wall. Brittany thought she had locked a confused grandfather in the basement. She didn't know she had just locked a wolf in a cage, and the wolf was hungry. She looked at my gray hair and saw weakness. She didn't know about Chicago in 1982. She didn't know about the union strikes where men were beaten with lead pipes for crossing the picket line. She didn't know that I built my company from nothing in a city run by sharks. And I didn't just survive. I thrived because I was the one shark they were afraid to bite. I had negotiated contracts with men who made Brittany look like a Girl Scout. I had buried problems under tons of concrete. I had outsmarted auditors, rivals, and corrupt inspectors. And now this girl, this child who had never worked a day of hard labor in her life, thought she could gaslight me. She thought she could rewrite my reality. I reached into my sock. She had taken my phone. She had taken my pills. But she hadn't searched me. I pulled out a burner phone I had bought at a convenience store near the scrapyard. It was cheap prepaid and untraceable. I didn't turn it on yet. Not here. The signal might interfere with the baby monitor upstairs if I wasn't careful. I put it back. I lay back on the cot, closing my eyes, but my mind was sharpening like a blade. I needed to know everything. I needed to know who she was talking to, where the money was going, and what her next move was. She had mentioned the nursery. That was the center of her world right now. That was where she spent hours on the phone thinking she was safe. I waited until nightfall. The house grew quiet. I heard Derek and Brittany arguing faintly upstairs, something about money, something about the credit card bill. Then silence. I checked the door, still locked. But it was a simple interior lock, the kind used for privacy, not security. I had built houses like this. I knew their skeletons. I reached up to the top of the door frame, feeling for the small hole in the molding that I had drilled 5 years ago to run a cable wire. I found a stiff piece of wire on the floor, a leftover from some old project, and slid it into the mechanism. Click. The door creaked open. I moved into the hallway. The house was dark. The floorboards were familiar to me. I knew which ones squeaked and which ones held their silence. I moved like a ghost, a shadow returning to haunt the living. I crept up the stairs, bypassing the master bedroom where I could hear Derek's heavy snoring. I went straight to the room at the end of the hall, the nursery. I pushed the door open. The smell of fresh paint was overwhelming. Moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating the crib, the changing table, and a mountain of unopened gifts. Brittany had gone all out. This room cost more than my first house. I scanned the room. I needed a vantage point, something that wouldn't be moved, something that would be in the room when she was there but ignored. My eyes landed on a large plush teddy bear sitting on the rocking chair in the corner. It was huge, holding a satin heart that said, "Baby's first best friend." Perfect. I pulled a small black device from my pocket. It was a high-sensitivity voice recorder, no bigger than a stick of gum. I had picked it up from Marcus's contact, a private investigator, before I came back to the house. It had a battery life of 3 days and was voice-activated. I took the bear and carefully undid the stitching at the back of its neck. I pushed the recorder deep inside the stuffing, positioning it near the front, but buried enough that it wouldn't be felt if someone hugged it. I smoothed the fur back down. It was invisible. I placed the bear back on the chair, angling it slightly so it faced the center of the room. This bear would hear everything. It would hear her phone calls to her lover. It would hear her plotting with her lawyer. It would hear the truth she spoke when she thought no one was listening. I slipped out of the room, closing the door until it latched silently. I went back down the stairs into the basement and locked the door from the inside, using the wire just as she had left it. I lay down on the cot, staring up at the ceiling. Above me, Brittany was sleeping in my bed, dreaming of my money. She didn't know that the walls now had ears. She didn't know that the senile old man in the basement was building a case that would bury her. Tomorrow the performance would continue. I would spill my soup. I would forget names. I would ask for my dead wife. I would be the burden she wanted me to be. But every night while she slept, I would be listening. And when I had enough, when the tape was full of her venom, I would play it for the world. Operation Senile Old Man was in full effect, and the first casualty would be her confidence. 3 days. That was how long I had been a prisoner in my own basement. The dampness of the concrete had settled into my bones, making my arthritis flare up with a vengeance. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation. Brittany had established a routine. She would come down twice a day, unlock the door, and slide a plastic tray onto the floor like she was feeding a stray dog. She didn't even look at me anymore. She just wrinkled her nose at the smell of the basement, a smell she had forced me into and left. The food was always the same. Cold leftovers, scraps from the meals she cooked for herself and my son upstairs, half-eaten toast, congealed macaroni and cheese. Yesterday she gave me a bowl of soup that was so salty I knew it was the bottom of the pot, the dregs that no one else wanted. "Eat up, Ray," she had said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "You need to keep your strength up. We wouldn't want you getting sick before the guest house is ready." I ate it. I ate every bite. Not because I was hungry, but because I needed the fuel. My body was the only weapon I had left, and I wasn't going to let it wither away because of her spite. But as I sat there in the dim light of the single bulb, chewing on a piece of stale bread, I heard a sound that wasn't Brittany's sharp clicking heels. It was a soft thud, then the creak of the door handle. I stiffened. I hunched my shoulders, preparing to play the role of the confused old man. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I stared blankly at the wall. The door opened slowly. It wasn't Brittany, and it wasn't Derek. It was Maya. My granddaughter stood in the doorway, illuminated by the light from the hallway. She was 16 with the same sharp eyes and stubborn chin as her grandmother. She was wearing ripped jeans and a hoodie, her headphones pulled down around her neck. She looked at me, and for the first time in days, I didn't see pity. I saw rage. She stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind her. She didn't say a word at first. She just looked at the tray of cold food on the floor. She looked at the thin blanket on the cot, then she looked at me. "Grandpa," she whispered. I didn't break character yet. I had to be sure. "Maya," I mumbled. "Is that you? Did you come to visit?" "Cut it out, Grandpa," she said, her voice fierce. "I know you are not crazy. I heard you on the phone with Mr. Washington 3 nights ago. I heard you talking about the car." I straightened up. The fog cleared from my eyes. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was holding a backpack against her chest. "You are sharp, kid," I said, my voice returning to its normal gravelly tone, just like your grandma. Maya dropped the backpack on the floor and rushed over to hug me. She smelled like rain and teenage rebellion. She squeezed me tight, and for a second my heart didn't feel so heavy. "I hate her," Maya said into my shoulder, her voice muffled. "I hate her so much. Dad is an idiot. He just follows her around like a puppy. She treats you like garbage, Grandpa." I patted her back. "It is okay, Maya. It is a temporary situation." She pulled back and unzipped her backpack. She pulled out a foil-wrapped package. It was a double cheeseburger from the diner down the street. It was still warm. "I saw what she gave you," Maya said, kicking the tray of cold leftovers. "Slop. She is feeding you slop while she orders sushi for herself. Eat this." I took the burger. It tasted like heaven. It tasted like loyalty. "Why are you down here?" Maya, I asked between bites. "If she catches you, she will make your life miserable." "My life is already miserable," she snapped. "She moved my stuff into the attic, Grandpa. She said she needs my room for a yoga studio." "A yoga studio? The baby isn't even born yet, and she is taking over everything. Dad just let her do it. He said I should be flexible." "Derek." I sighed. My son was a good man once. But he had a weakness for women who told him what to do. He mistook control for love. Maya sat on the edge of the cot. She looked nervous. She kept glancing at the door. "Grandpa, there is something else," she said. "What is it?" "You know how she is always on her iPad," Maya said. "Ordering clothes, checking her social media. She acts like she is some big influencer." I nodded. "Well, she left it on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower." Maya continued. "She thinks she is smart, but she uses the same passcode for everything. Her birthday." I stopped eating. "And?" "I unlocked it," Maya said. "I wanted to see if she was talking trash about me to her friends. But I found something worse." She reached into her backpack again and pulled out the iPad. The screen cracked to life in the dim basement light. Maya tapped the screen a few times and handed it to me. "Read this. It is a messaging app." She thought she hid it in a folder called Recipes. I took the device. My hands were steady, but my stomach turned cold. The conversation was with a contact named Julian. I scrolled up. Message from Julian. "Did the old man sign the papers yet? I need that cash infusion, babe. My investors are getting impatient." Message from Brittany. "Not yet. He is stubborn. But I have him in the basement. I am breaking him down. The doctor gave me more sedatives. He will sign by Friday." Message from Julian. "Good. And what about Derek? Does he suspect anything?" Message from Brittany. "Derek, please. He is so desperate to be a dad he would believe anything. He thinks he is picking out names. He doesn't know he is just the wallet." I felt the blood roaring in my ears. I scrolled down further. Message from Brittany. "I can't wait for this to be over. Once the baby is born, we will have the paternity leverage to secure the trust fund. Then we can divorce him and take half." Message from Julian. "Just make sure the baby has my eyes." I stared at the screen. The words blurred for a second, then sharpened into crystal clarity. The baby wasn't Derek's. My son, my foolish, weak son, was destroying his father and his own life for a child that wasn't even his. He was being cuckolded in his own home, financing the lifestyle of the man who was sleeping with his wife. Grandpa, Maya whispered, "That means the baby isn't my brother or sister." "No, I said, my voice like crushed glass. It isn't. She is evil, Maya said, tears welling up in her eyes. She is going to ruin Dad. She is going to take the house, the money, everything. We have to tell him. We have to go upstairs right now and show him this. I gripped the iPad. Every instinct in my body screamed to do exactly that. To march upstairs, kick down the bedroom door, and shove this screen into Derek's face. To watch his world shatter so he could finally see the viper he was sleeping with. But I stopped. If I showed him this now, what would happen? There would be screaming. There would be crying. Derek would be heartbroken. He might file for divorce. Brittany would be kicked out. But she would walk away. She would walk away with the jewelry she bought on my credit cards. She would walk away with the cash she stole from the car sale. She would play the victim in court, claiming Derek was abusive, claiming the messages were fake. She was a master manipulator. She might even talk her way out of it, blaming hormones or a moment of weakness. And she would not go to prison. I didn't just want her gone, Maya. I wanted justice. I wanted her to pay for every hour I spent in this basement. I wanted her to pay for the garage. I wanted her to pay for the years she stole from my son. I looked at Maya. No, I said firmly. What? Maya looked shocked. Grandpa, look at what she is doing. We are not showing him this, I said. Not yet. Why? Because adultery isn't a crime, Maya, I said, handing the iPad back to her. Being a bad person isn't a crime. Lying to your husband isn't a crime. If we blow this up now, she walks away with a slap on the wrist. She gets a divorce settlement. She wins. Then what do we do? Maya asked. We wait, I said. We wait for her to get greedy. I leaned forward. Listen to me, Maya. In these messages, she mentioned cash infusion. She mentioned investors. Julian isn't just a lover. He is a partner in crime. She is trying to get my money, not just to spend it, but to move it. I needed her to cross the line. I needed her to commit wire fraud. I needed her to try to access the offshore accounts she thought I had. I needed her to commit a federal offense. Take screenshots of everything I ordered. Send them to a secure email. Then delete the history of you sending them. Put the iPad back exactly where you found it. But Grandpa? Do it, I said, grabbing her hand. Maya, this is the hardest thing you will ever have to do. You have to watch your dad live a lie for a few more days. You have to let her think she is winning. Can you do that? Can you be strong enough to wait for the kill shot? Maya looked at me. She wiped her tears. She took a deep breath. She looked at the iPad, then back at me. I can do it, she said. I want to see her in handcuffs. That is my girl, I said. Now go, put it back, and bring me more batteries for my recorder tomorrow. Maya hugged me one last time, tighter than before. Then she slipped out of the room, moving like a shadow. I sat back on the cot, the taste of the cheeseburger still in my mouth. The revelation burned in my chest. My son was raising another man's child. The betrayal was total. It was biblical. But it was also the final nail in her coffin. I lay down in the darkness, a cold smile touching my lips. Brittany thought she was playing a game of house. She thought she was securing a future. She didn't know that she had just handed me the nuclear codes. I closed my eyes. Sleep well, Brittany, I thought. Dream of your lover. Dream of my money. Because when you wake up, the nightmare begins, and I will be the monster under your bed. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore, I was fighting for the bloodline. And for the Washingtons, blood was everything. She had polluted it, and now she would be purged. The air in the basement had grown heavy, a suffocating mix of damp concrete and the metallic tang of my own fear. But the fear wasn't for myself anymore. It was a performance, a cloak I wore to hide the dagger I was sharpening. 2 days had passed since Maya showed me the truth on the iPad. 2 days of listening to Brittany pace upstairs, her footsteps frantic, her voice sharp as she argued on the phone with her lover. I knew they were desperate. The renovation bills were piling up. The contractor for the fake guest house was threatening to walk off the job, and her credit cards were maxed out. I was just waiting for the moment her desperation outweighed her caution. It happened on a Tuesday morning. The door to my cell opened with a force that rattled the hinges. Brittany stormed in, bringing a cloud of expensive perfume that smelled like rotten flowers in the stale air. She wasn't carrying a food tray this time. She was carrying a leather portfolio and a sleek silver pen. She didn't sit down. She paced back and forth in the small space, her heels clicking on the concrete like a countdown. She looked manic. Her eyes were wide, her makeup a little too heavy, trying to cover the dark circles of stress. "Dad," she started, her voice high and tight. "We need to talk. We have a situation, a financial opportunity that we cannot miss." I sat up slowly on the cot, rubbing my eyes. "Opportunity," I mumbled, slurring my words slightly. "Yes," she said, stopping in front of me and thrusting the portfolio into my hands. "Listen to me closely, Ray. You know I have been working on my business, my cosmetics line. It is taking off. We have investors lining up in Dubai. But we need liquidity. We need a cash injection to secure the manufacturing deal before the end of the month." I looked down at the papers. They were thick, filled with legal jargon and glossy photos of skincare bottles that looked like every other bottle on the shelf. But buried in the text was the real purpose. It was a deed of sale, an expedited sale of the main house. She wanted to sell my home, the home I built, the home where I raised my son. She wanted to liquidate it and pour the money into a shell company that I knew, thanks to Maya's snooping, was registered to her lover Julian. "You want to sell the house?" I asked, my voice trembling. "But where will we live?" "We will rent a penthouse downtown," she lied effortlessly. "A better place, no stairs, full service. It is for you, Ray. This house is a money pit, but we need to act now. The market is hot. I have a cash buyer ready to close in 48 hours. All you have to do is sign." She clicked the pen and shoved it toward me. "Sign right here, next to the X." I took the pen. My hand shook. I wasn't faking the tremor entirely. The rage inside me was so hot it made my muscles spasm. She was trying to render me homeless to fund her affair. I brought the pen to the paper. Brittany leaned in, her eyes hungry, her breath hitching. She was practically vibrating with greed. I pressed the tip to the paper. Then I let the pen slip. It skidded across the page, making a jagged line through the text. "Oops," I whispered. "I am sorry. My hand, it is not working right," Brittany hissed through her teeth. She grabbed my hand, her fingernails digging into my loose skin. "Just hold it steady, Ray. Focus. Do it for Derek. Do it for the baby." I looked up at her. Her face was inches from mine. I saw the cruelty there, naked and ugly. I can't," I stammered, dropping the pen. "It is too much money, Brittany. Selling the house. It feels wrong. What if the business fails?" "It won't fail," she screamed, losing her composure. "Just sign the damn paper, old man." I shrank back against the wall, pulling my knees to my chest. She stood over me, panting, realizing she had gone too far. She took a deep breath, smoothing her hair, trying to put the mask back on. "I am sorry, Ray," she said, her voice dropping to a forced whisper. "I am just stressed. We need this money. If we don't get it, we could lose everything. The house might be foreclosed on anyway. I am trying to save us." I looked at her, and I knew it was time. Time to bait the hook. Time to offer her something so tempting she wouldn't look for the trap. "I don't want to lose the house," I said softly. "I promised Derek this house would be his." "Then help us," she pleaded. Maybe there is another way," I said, looking at the ceiling as if searching for a memory. "What other way?" she asked, snapping her head up. I have some savings," I said, "from the old days. From before the construction company went legit." Brittany went still. "What savings? You mean your pension? That is peanuts." "No," I said, "not here. In the islands." Her eyes narrowed. "The islands. Cayman," I whispered. "First Caribbean Bank. I opened it in '85. I put money there for a rainy day, just to keep it safe from the IRS. I haven't touched it in 20 years. Compound interest. It should be a lot by now." I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. A secret offshore account. Untaxed money. It was every fraudster's wet dream. It was quick. It was liquid. And best of all, she thought it was untraceable. How much, she asked, her voice barely audible. I don't know exactly," I said. "Maybe 200,000. Maybe $300,000. I saw her throat swallow. That was enough to pay off her debts, give Julian his cut, and still have enough for a new wardrobe. "Why didn't you tell us?" she demanded, but the anger was gone, replaced by pure avarice. I forgot I lied. "Until now. You said we needed cash. I don't want to sell the house, Brittany. Can't we use that money instead?" "Yes," she said, breathless. "Yes, we can. How do we get it?" I frowned, tapping my head. "I have the account number memorized. It is the birthday of my first dog." "But the transfer..." I can't go to the bank. I am too sick. You don't have to go, she said quickly. We can do a wire transfer. I can set it up online. I just need the account number and the routing code. But it is illegal, isn't it? I asked innocently. Moving that much money without declaring it. Don't worry about that, she said, waving her hand. I have an accountant who handles these things. It is perfectly safe. Just give me the numbers, Ray. I hesitated. This was the moment. If I gave her these numbers, she would be attempting to access a federal sting operation. The account existed, yes. But it wasn't a secret stash of dirty money. It was a honeypot I had set up with Marcus years ago for a completely different reason, and yesterday I had texted him the code word to activate the monitoring. If she tried to move a single cent from that account, she wouldn't just be stealing from an elder. She would be committing wire fraud. She would be crossing international banking lines with unauthorized credentials. That wasn't a local police matter. That was the FBI. That was 10 years in federal prison, no parole. Are you sure? I asked. I am sure, Dad, she said, smiling for real this time. A predatory, shark-like smile. You are saving the family. You are a hero. I reached for the pen again. I didn't shake this time. I wrote down a series of numbers on the back of the portfolio. 1, 7, 4, 9. She watched every stroke of the pen like a hawk watching a mouse. When I finished, she snatched the paper away. Thank you, Ray, she said, standing up. You rest now. I will handle the rest. I will make sure the house stays safe. She turned and practically ran out of the basement. She didn't even lock the door. She was too excited. She was rushing upstairs to her laptop. She was rushing to log in to impersonate me and to click transfer. I sat back on the cot and listened to her footsteps pounding up the stairs. I imagined her sitting at the kitchen table, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I imagined her calling Julian, telling him they were rich. I let out a long, slow breath. She thought she had just found a pot of gold. She didn't know she had just pulled the pin on a grenade. Wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. The charges were stacking up like bricks in a wall that was about to fall on top of her. I closed my eyes and waited. I knew Marcus was watching the system on his end. I knew the moment she hit enter, an alert would flash on a screen in a federal office downtown. Go ahead, Brittany, I whispered to the darkness. Be greedy. Take it all. The more you try to take, the heavier the chains will be. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like a prisoner. I felt like the executioner. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The pen dropped from my hand and hit the concrete floor with a hollow click. I let my body go limp, sliding off the cot in a slow, controlled collapse. I didn't hit the ground hard. I knew how to fall, a trick I learned from years of walking on icy scaffolding. But to Brittany, it looked like the strings had been cut from a puppet. I let out a low, gurgling groan, my eyes rolling back into my head, my left hand twitching rhythmically against the cold floor. It was a performance of a lifetime. I had watched my own father suffer a stroke when I was 30, and the image was burned into my memory. The slack jaw, the vacant stare, the terrifying helplessness. I channeled all of that now. Brittany gasped. For a second, just a split second, I saw genuine panic in her eyes. Not because she cared about me, but because she needed me alive long enough for that wire transfer to clear. If I died right now, the money in the Cayman account, the money she thought she was stealing, would be frozen in probate. She needed a signature, not a corpse. Ray, she screamed, dropping to her knees beside me. Ray, can you hear me? I didn't answer. I just kept twitching, letting a line of drool escape the corner of my mouth. It was degrading, humiliating, but necessary. I had to push her into the endgame. She didn't call 911 immediately. I knew she wouldn't. She grabbed my face, slapping my cheeks lightly, checking my pulse. She was calculating. If she called an ambulance, they would take me to the nearest public hospital. But that wasn't part of her plan. She needed a specific diagnosis. She needed a paper trail that said Raymond Coleman was mentally incompetent, physically deteriorating, and in need of permanent high-security care. I heard her scramble for her phone. She didn't dial 3 digits. She dialed a contact. Dr. Peterson, she said, her voice breathless. It is happening. He is having an episode. Yes, just like we discussed. He is violent. He is thrashing. Yes, I think it is a psychotic break mixed with a TIA. I am bringing him in. Have the papers ready. She hung up and looked down at me. The panic was gone. In its place was a cold, satisfied resolve. She wasn't seeing a dying man. She was seeing a problem that was finally solving itself. "Get up, Ray," she hissed, grabbing my arm and hauling me up. "We are going for a ride." She dragged me to the car, my feet dragging uselessly on the gravel. She shoved me into the passenger seat of her Range Rover, the leather cool against my sweating skin. As she drove, speeding through the suburban street, she kept glancing at me, rehearsing her lines. "I am so sorry, officer," he just snapped. "He tried to attack me. He doesn't know who he is." She was writing the script for my imprisonment. We arrived at St. Jude's Medical Center, but she didn't go to the main emergency entrance. She pulled around to the private admission bay. This was where the wealthy parked when they wanted their rehab stints to be kept quiet. Dr. Peterson was waiting. He was a small, oily man in a white coat that looked too expensive for a hospital salary. I knew him by reputation. He was the kind of doctor who signed prescriptions for celebrities who didn't need them, and institutionalized inconvenient relatives for a fee. Brittany jumped out, screaming for help. Orderlies rushed over, pulling me onto a gurney. I kept up the act, thrashing weakly, mumbling incoherent sounds. "He tried to kill me," Brittany sobbed, clinging to Dr. Peterson's arm. "He was hallucinating. He thought I was a demon. He threw a knife at me. Please, doctor, you have to help him. You have to sedate him before he hurts himself or someone else." I watched through half-closed eyelids as Peterson nodded gravely. He didn't even check my vitals. He just looked at Brittany and gave a subtle nod. "We need to get him under control immediately," Peterson said to the nurses. "Prepare 5 milligrams of Haldol and 2 of Ativan and get the restraints. We need to run a full toxicology screen and prepare the competency hearing paperwork." This was it. The trap. If they injected me with that cocktail, I would be a vegetable for days. I would be unable to speak, unable to defend myself. And by the time I woke up, I would be in a lockdown facility with my rights signed away. But Brittany had made one fatal mistake. She assumed St. Jude's was her territory. She didn't know that St. Jude's was built by Coleman Construction in 1998. She didn't know that the chief of internal medicine, Dr. Evans, was a man whose medical school tuition I had paid for when his father, my foreman, died on the job. As they wheeled me down the corridor, I saw him. Dr. Evans was standing by the nurses' station reviewing a chart. He looked up as the commotion passed. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Stop!" Evans ordered, his voice booming down the hall. Peterson froze. "Dr. Evans, this is my patient, a psychiatric emergency." "That is Raymond Coleman," Evans said, stepping in front of the gurney. "And he doesn't have psychiatric emergencies. What is going on here?" Brittany stepped forward, her tears drying instantly. "Who are you?" "Dr. Peterson is Ray's primary care physician. Ray is having a stroke. He is dangerous." I saw Evans look at me. I stopped thrashing. I locked eyes with him and gave a single deliberate blink. Then I tapped my index finger against the side of the gurney. 3 times. The signal. Evans didn't flinch. He looked at Peterson. "If he is having a stroke, he needs a CT scan, not Haldol. I am taking over this case." "You can't do that," Brittany shrieked. "I have power of attorney. I decide who treats him." "Actually," Evans said calmly, checking the clipboard on the gurney. "Until you produce that document and it is verified by the hospital legal team, he is a ward of this emergency room. And as chief of medicine, I am overriding you. Nurse, get blood work. Now." Brittany looked trapped. She couldn't argue too much without looking suspicious. "Fine," she spat. "Test his blood. You will see. He hasn't been taking his heart medication. He is delirious. His levels are all over the place. That is why he is acting like this." They wheeled me into a trauma room. Evans shooed the other nurses out, leaving only one trusted phlebotomist. He closed the curtain. Ray, Evans whispered, leaning down, "You can drop the act. What the hell is going on?" I opened my eyes fully. I sat up, grabbing Evans's arm. "No time, Doc. She is trying to commit me. She wants me sedated so she can steal my estate," I figured, Evans said grimly. "Peterson is a hack." "Listen to me," I said, reaching into my sock. I pulled out a small plastic vial. It contained blood I had drawn myself 2 hours ago using a diabetic kit I bought at the pharmacy. It was clean, no stress hormones, no elevated cortisol, and most importantly, full of the heart medication I had supposedly not been taking because I had crushed the pills into the sample before sealing it. "Swap it," I ordered. Evans looked at the vial, then at me. "Ray, this is highly unethical. So is kidnapping," I snapped. "She is going to ruin me, Evans. I need her to think she won. I need her to leave this hospital thinking I am going to the loony bin. If she thinks I am safe, she will go home and execute the wire transfer. That is the federal crime. I need to nail her." Evans hesitated for a second, then took the vial. You always were a crazy son of a bitch, Ray. He turned to the phlebotomist. Run this, label it as the sample you just took, and tell Dr. Peterson the patient is sedated and resting. What about the Haldol? The nurse asked. Give him saline, Evans said. 10 minutes later, Dr. Evans walked out to the waiting room where Brittany was pacing. I lay on the bed, eyes closed, breathing heavily, pretending the saline injection was a powerful sedative. Mrs. Coleman Evans said, his voice neutral. We have stabilized him. You were right. He was very agitated. We have administered a sedative. He will be out for at least 24 hours. Brittany let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. Thank God. And the paperwork. Dr. Peterson is handling the transfer papers for the long-term care facility, Evans lied smoothly. But we need to keep him here overnight for observation. You should go home. Get some rest. You look exhausted. Can I see him? She asked. I held my breath. He is unconscious, Evans said. It is better if you don't disturb him. He needs quiet. Brittany didn't argue. In fact, she looked relieved. She didn't want to see me. She wanted to be rid of me. Okay, she said. Call me when the transfer is ready. Make sure he doesn't wake up. I heard her heels clicking away down the hall. The sound was fast, energetic. She wasn't walking like a woman who had just hospitalized her father-in-law. She was walking like a woman who had just won the lottery. When the sound of her footsteps faded, I opened my eyes. Dr. Evans was standing at the foot of the bed, shaking his head. She is a piece of work, Ray, he said. You have no idea. I sat up, ripping the IV tape off my hand. She just authorized a transfer to a facility that probably doesn't even have windows. What now? Evans asked. Now I wait, I said. I need to stay here tonight, Evans. Keep me off the books if you can. Or just lose the chart. I will put you in the on-call room, Evans said. But Ray, whatever you are planning, make sure it sticks. Oh, it will stick, I said, swinging my legs off the bed. I imagined Brittany getting into her car. I imagined her pulling out her phone and calling Julian. I could hear the conversation in my head. It is done, she would say. The old man is gone. He is vegetable. The house is ours. The money is ours. She would drive home singing along to the radio. She would walk into my house, kick off her shoes, and open a bottle of my vintage wine, the wine I was saving for Maya's wedding. She would pour 2 glasses, one for her and one for the ghost of the man she thought she had buried. She would open her laptop. She would log into the bank portal. She would enter the account numbers I gave her. She had no idea that I wasn't sedated. She had no idea that while she was celebrating, I was sitting in a hospital room drinking bad coffee and watching the clock. She thought she had just closed the book on Ray Coleman. She didn't know she had just written the prologue to her own destruction. Go ahead, Brittany, I whispered to the empty room. Pop the champagne. Toast to your victory, because tomorrow the hangover is going to be fatal. I lay back on the pillows, feeling the adrenaline hum in my veins. The hospital charade was over. The trap was sprung. All that was left now was the collection. And I was going to collect every single penny of debt she owed me. They brought me back from the hospital the next morning. I was playing the part of the recovering stroke victim perfectly. My left arm hung uselessly at my side. My speech was a slur of incoherent vowels, and I let Brittany guide me down the stairs to the basement like a toddler. She was in high spirits. She practically floated through the house. In her mind, the Cayman Islands wire transfer was processing. The doctors had certified me as incompetent, and she was days away from being a millionaire. She left me on the cot with a bottle of water and a pat on the head that felt more like a slap. Rest up, Ray, she had said with a cheerful grin. Big changes are coming. I waited until the lock clicked. Then I sat up, stretched my neck, and checked my watch. It was 10 in the morning. The construction crew in the backyard had been hammering away since 7. The sound of the excavator was a constant roar, shaking the dust from the basement ceiling beams. Brittany had ordered them to double the pace. She wanted the ADU finished so she could officially move me out of the main house and stage it for sale. But she didn't know that at 6 this morning, while waiting for my discharge papers, I had made a call from Dr. Evans's private line. I didn't call the police. I called the city zoning and planning department, specifically the desk of Inspector Kowalski. Kowalski was a man who hated 2 things: unpermitted work and bribes. And I happen to know, because I poured the original foundation of this neighborhood in 1985, that the main municipal water line ran exactly 4 feet under the elm tree Brittany had just ordered them to dig up. At 10:15, the noise stopped. It wasn't a gradual stop. It was sudden. The excavator engine cut out. The shouting of the workers died down. A heavy, ominous silence fell over the house. I moved to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. I heard the front doorbell ring. It wasn't the polite ding-dong of a delivery driver. It was 3 sharp, authoritative raps. Police knock. Or in this case, city knock. I heard Brittany's heels clicking rapidly across the hardwood floor above me. She opened the door. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with irritation. "Mrs. Brittany Coleman," a deep voice boomed. "I am Senior Inspector Kowalski from the Department of Buildings. We received a report of unpermitted excavation and potential interference with critical city infrastructure." Brittany laughed. It sounded nervous. "That is ridiculous. We have permits. My contractor handled everything." Your contractor, Kowalski said, his voice flat, pulled a permit for a garden shed. He did not pull a permit for a habitable dwelling unit with plumbing and electrical. And more importantly, he did not get clearance from the water department. I smiled in the darkness. She had gone cheap on the contractor. She hired a guy who cut corners to save money for her shopping sprees. "I invite you to step into the backyard," Ma'am Kowalski continued. "My team is already back there. Do you see that water pooling in the trench?" There was a pause. Then I heard the back door slide open. "Oh my God," Brittany gasped. "Your excavator operator just nicked the 20-inch main," Kowalski said. "You are lucky it didn't burst completely, or this entire block would be underwater." "But the structural integrity of the pipe is compromised." "Well, fix it," Brittany snapped. "That is what taxes are for." Kowalski laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "No, ma'am. That is not how this works. You authorize digging without a survey. This is negligence. I am issuing an immediate stop work order. That means red tags on every door. No one steps foot on this site until an engineering survey is done." "Fine," Brittany said, her voice rising in panic. "Just tag it. We will deal with it later." And Kowalski added, "Dropping the hammer, the fine for compromising a city main starts at $50,000, payable within 48 hours. If not paid, the city places a lien on the property, and we revoke the certificate of occupancy. That means you cannot live here." "50,000, Brittany shrieked. "You are insane. I don't have $50,000 lying around." "Then I suggest you find it," Kowalski said. "Here is the citation. Sign here." I heard the sound of paper being ripped. I heard the front door close. Then I heard the scream. It was a primal sound of rage. Brittany threw something, probably a vase, against the wall. Glass shattered. "Derek," she screamed. "Derek, get down here." I heard my son running down the stairs. "What? What happened? Is Dad okay?" "Forget your dad," Brittany yelled. "The city just fined us 50 grand. They are shutting us down. They are going to kick us out, Derek." 50 grand, Derek stammered. "But the wire transfer, Dad's money. It takes 3 days to clear international banks," she shouted. "We need money today, right now, or they put a lien on the house. If there is a lien, we can't sell it to the investors. The whole deal collapses. Julian, the partners, will pull out." She was hyperventilating. I could hear her pacing right above my head. The trap I had set was tightening. She was desperate, and desperate people make fatal mistakes. "Call the bank," Derek said. "Ask for a loan. I maxed out the credit lines, you idiot," she spat at him. "And your credit score is trash because of the student loans." "Then what do we do?" Derek asked, his voice trembling. Brittany went silent. The silence stretched for a long minute. Then she spoke, her voice low and dangerous. "We have to sell the house. Today." "We can't," Derek said. "The investor needs clean title. If the city puts a lien, we sell it to the we buy ugly houses guys," she said rapidly. "The cash flippers. They don't care about liens. They will pay less, but they pay instantly. We get the cash, pay the fine, and we still walk away with enough to start over." "But Dad," Derek said, "it is his house. He has to sign." "He is a vegetable, Derek," she said. "He doesn't know what day it is. He has to sign," Derek insisted. The notary needs to see him sign." Brittany laughed. It was a manic, terrifying sound. "Then he will sign. I will make him sign. He is scared of me. He will do whatever I say." I heard her footsteps coming toward the basement door. This was it, the final confrontation. I hurried back to the cot. I lay down, messed up my hair, and let my arm dangle. I slowed my breathing. The door flew open. Light flooded the dark room. Brittany didn't walk down the stairs, she ran. She grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me hard. "Wake up," she screamed. "Wake up, old man." I groaned, fluttering my eyes open. "Brittany," I mumbled. "What? What is wrong?" "Everything is wrong because of you," she hissed. Her face was contorted, her makeup smeared. She looked like a demon. "You built this house on top of a water main and didn't tell anyone. I don't remember," I stammered. "Shut up," she interrupted. "Listen to me. You are going to fix this." She pulled a document from her pocket. It wasn't the fancy investor contract from before. This was a dirty one-page agreement, a distress sale contract. "I need you to sign this," she said, shoving a pen into my hand. "Now." "What is it?" I asked, pulling back. "It is for the insurance," she lied. "For the pipe. Sign it or they are going to arrest Derek." "Do you want your son to go to jail, Ray?" I looked at Derek. He was standing at the top of the stairs, refusing to come down. He couldn't watch. He was a coward to the bitter end. I don't want Derek to go to jail," I whispered. "Then sign." She pressed the paper against my chest. I looked at it. The sale price was listed as $300,000. The house was worth $800,000. She was selling my life's work for pennies just to save her own skin. I held the pen. I let my hand shake violently. I can't hold it," I whined. Brittany grabbed my hand. She wrapped her fingers around mine, forcing the pen down. "I will help you," she gritted out. She began to move my hand, forcing a signature. This was assault. This was coercion. And unbeknownst to her, the little teddy bear I had retrieved from the nursery and hidden under my cot was recording every desperate, violent breath she took. Just as the pen touched the paper, I stopped shaking. I went rigid. Brittany paused, looking down at me. "Why did you stop?" I looked up. I dropped the slack-jawed expression. My eyes cleared. I looked at her with the cold, hard stare of the man who used to fire incompetent foremen for breakfast. "Because, Brittany," I said, my voice steady and clear, devoid of any slur, "you forgot to date it." She froze. She pulled back as if I had burned her. You can speak." I sat up slowly, brushing the dust off my shoulder. "I can speak. I can hear. And I can see exactly what you are doing." She stumbled back, hitting the concrete wall. "You were faking. The stroke, the hospital, all a show," I said, standing up. My knees hurt, but I stood tall. "Just like you faking being a mother. Just like you faking being a faithful wife." "Derek," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Derek, he is awake. He is crazy." Derek ran down the stairs. He looked between us, confused. "Dad." "The game is over," I said, tossing the unsigned contract onto the floor. "There is no wire transfer coming, Brittany. There is no money in the Cayman Islands. But there is a very real recording of you trying to access a federal banking system with stolen credentials. And now there is a witness to you trying to force a signature on a distress sale." Brittany's face went from pale to purple. "You set me up," she screeched. "You senile old bat. You ruined us." "No," I said, stepping closer to her. "You ruined yourselves. I just gave you the shovel." She lunged at me. Her hands were claws, aiming for my face. Derek grabbed her waist, holding her back. "Stop it, Brittany!" Derek yelled. "Let me go!" she screamed, thrashing in his arms. "I will kill him! I will kill him!" "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Add assault to the list." "The police are already on their way, Brittany. Not for the noise, for the fraud." The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. Brittany stopped fighting. She looked at the basement window. She realized the walls were closing in. "You think you won?" she whispered, her eyes full of venom. "You have nothing. You are alone." I picked up the contract from the floor and ripped it in half. "I would rather be alone in a house of rubble," I said, "than live in a palace with a snake." I walked past them up the stairs, leaving the darkness of the basement for the last time. I had business to attend to. And the first order of business was opening the door for the FBI agents pulling into the driveway. The silence in the living room was heavy enough to crush a lesser man, but I stood tall for the first time in weeks. My knees still ached from the dampness of the basement, and my stomach growled from days of cold leftovers, but my mind was sharper than a diamond cutter. Brittany stood near the kitchen island, clutching the countertop with white knuckles, her chest heaving as she tried to process the resurrection of the man she thought she had buried. Derek was just a ghost in the corner, staring at me with a mix of terror and confusion, unable to decide whether to comfort his wife or apologize to his father. I didn't give them a chance to speak. I didn't give them a chance to spin another lie or formulate a new plan. I simply adjusted the collar of my wrinkled shirt, brushed the basement dust off my sleeve, and walked toward the front door. "Where are you going?" Brittany shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You can't leave. The police are coming. You assaulted me. You have to stay here." I stopped with my hand on the brass doorknob, the cold metal feeling grounding against my palm. I turned my head just enough to look at her over my shoulder. "I am going for a walk," I said, my voice low and steady. "The air in here is poisonous. I need to breathe something that doesn't smell like betrayal." I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. The sunlight hit my face, and for a moment I had to close my eyes. It felt like a baptism. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of freshly cut grass and asphalt. The construction crew was gone, their yellow machines sitting silent and accused behind the orange fencing Inspector Kowalski had erected. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that hides 1,000 secrets behind manicured hedges. I walked down the steps, my cane clicking rhythmically against the concrete. I didn't make it to the sidewalk before I heard the front door fly open behind me. Brittany and Derek stumbled out after me, desperate to maintain control, desperate to keep the narrative inside the four walls where they held the power. "Dad, please," Derek called out, "just come back inside. We can talk about this. We can fix this." "There is nothing to fix, son," I said, not stopping. "The foundation is cracked. The beams are rotten. You don't fix a house like that. You condemn it." I reached the end of the driveway just as a low rumble began to vibrate through the soles of my shoes. It wasn't the harsh grinding of the construction excavators, and it wasn't the high-pitched whine of the suburban SUVs that patrolled this street. It was a deep, guttural growl, a sound that spoke of raw horsepower and American steel, a sound I knew better than the beat of my own heart. Brittany froze on the porch. "What is that?" she snapped, looking up and down the street. "Is that another truck?" I told them to stop. The vehicle turned the corner at the end of the block. It was a massive flatbed hauler, the kind used to transport high-end luxury vehicles. The cab was gleaming chrome, but my eyes were fixed on the cargo. Sitting on the bed of the truck, secured by thick straps, was a masterpiece in night mist blue, my 1967 Shelby GT500. But it wasn't the car Brittany had sold. It wasn't the dusty project car sitting under a tarp. It was immaculate. The chrome bumpers caught the sun like mirrors. The white racing stripes were crisp and clean, running down the center of the hood like a badge of honor. It looked like it had just rolled off the assembly line 50 years ago, ready to tear up the asphalt. The truck hissed to a halt right in front of my driveway, blocking Brittany's view of the street. The driver, a large man with a thick beard and a clipboard, hopped down from the cab. He didn't look at Brittany. He looked straight at me. "Mr. Coleman?" he asked. I nodded. "That is me." "Special delivery from Mr. Sterling," the driver said, grinning. "He said to tell you she runs like a dream. He had his guys detail it overnight. Said you would want her looking her best for the reunion." Brittany ran down the driveway, her heels clicking frantically on the pavement. She stared at the car, her mouth hanging open. Her eyes darted from the car to me, then back to the car. She looked like she was trying to solve a math equation that didn't have an answer. That is the Mustang," she stammered. "But I sold it. I sold it to the scrapyard." I walked over to the truck as the driver lowered the ramp. I ran my hand along the cool metal of the fender. It felt solid. It felt real. "You did sell it," I said calmly, watching as the driver unhooked the straps. "You sold it for $12,000. "How did you get it back?" she screamed, her face turning a blotchy red. "Did you buy it? Did you use the money? You lied to me. You said there was no money in the Caymans." She was so predictable. Even in the face of disaster, all she could think about was the money. She thought I had tapped into the secret account she was drooling over to buy the car back. I turned to face her, leaning against the door of my car. I crossed my arms. "I didn't buy it back, Brittany. I didn't spend a dime. then how she demanded, pointing a shaking finger at the car. "That car belongs to the scrapyard, or whoever they sold it to. You can't just take it. That is theft." I laughed. It was a deep, dry laugh that came from the belly. "Theft," I repeated. "That is an interesting word coming from you. Let me explain how the law actually works, since you seem to be confused." I took a step toward her and she took a step back. "You sold a vehicle that was not titled in your name," I said, my voice hardening. "You used a fraudulent power of attorney to convince a scrapyard owner that you had the right to sell it. But since that document was obtained under duress, and since I was never mentally incompetent, the sale was void from the moment you took the cash." Brittany blinked rapidly, trying to follow the logic. But I had the paper. A fake paper, I countered. "Which means you didn't sell a car, Brittany. You stole a car. You committed grand larceny. And when you commit larceny, the property doesn't belong to the buyer. It still belongs to the victim." I gestured to the shiny blue beast behind me. "I reported the vehicle stolen the day I went to the scrapyard. I tracked it to Mr. Sterling. But unlike you, Mr. Sterling is an honest man. And more importantly, Mr. Sterling is my lawyer's brother. When I told him the car was stolen property, he didn't argue. He didn't ask for a refund. He impounded it for me. He held it as evidence." "Evidence," Brittany whispered, the color draining from her face completely. "Exactly," I said. "This isn't just a car anymore. It is a rolling felony. It is physical proof that you trafficked in stolen goods across state lines, since Mr. Sterling lives in Indiana. Do you know what the penalty is for interstate trafficking of stolen property? It starts at 10 years, Brittany. And that is before we even get to the wire fraud you attempted this morning." Derek made a choking sound. He looked at the car, then at his wife. "Brittany, you said it was legal. You said you handled it." "She lied to you, Derek," I said, not looking at my son. "Just like she lied about the baby. Just like she lied about the guest house." Brittany was trembling now, but it wasn't from rage anymore. It was fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. She looked at the Mustang like it was a monster that had come to eat her alive. "You set me up," she hissed. "You planned this. You let me sell it so you could trap me. I didn't let you do anything I said. You chose to sell it. You chose to be greedy. You chose to treat me like a piece of furniture you could toss out. I just made sure that when you tried to throw me away, I landed on my feet." The driver finished unloading the car. He walked over and dangled the keys in front of me. The original keys, the silver pony keychain glinting in the sun. "She is all yours, Mr. Coleman," the driver said. I took the keys. The weight of them was familiar, comforting. I walked to the driver's side door and opened it. The smell of old leather and gasoline hit me. It was the smell of freedom. I slid into the bucket seat, the springs groaning slightly under my weight. I gripped the steering wheel, feeling the vibrations of the past 50 years running through my hands. "Ray, wait!" Brittany cried out, lunging forward. "You can't do this. You can't just drive away. We have to talk. The police... You said the police were coming." I inserted the key into the ignition. "They are coming," I said, looking at her through the open window. "And they are not coming for me. I suggest you go inside and put on something comfortable, Brittany. Maybe something without a belt. They take those away in holding cells." I turned the key. The engine didn't just start, it roared. The V8 woke up with a thunderous bark that shook the windows of the house. It was a sound of defiance, a sound of power. Brittany flinched, covering her ears, stepping back as a cloud of exhaust puffed out from the tailpipe. I revved the engine once, letting the tachometer climb, letting the noise drown out her protests, drown out her lies, drown out the years of disrespect. I shifted into gear. "This car is a survivor," I shouted over the engine noise. "It has been through wrecks, it has been rusted out, it has been stripped for parts, but it is still here, it is still running, just like me." I didn't wait for her response. I let off the clutch and the Mustang surged forward. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the son who stood paralyzed on the driveway, or the daughter-in-law who was realizing that her golden goose had just turned into a dragon. I drove down the street, the wind rushing through the open window, cooling the sweat on my brow. I wasn't just driving a car, I was driving a verdict. The senile old man was gone. Ray Coleman was back behind the wheel. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where I was going. I was going to finish this. Not with violence, not with shouting, but with the cold, hard letter of the law. Brittany wanted to play games with titles and deeds. Fine. I was about to show her that I wrote the rule book. As I turned the corner onto the main avenue, I saw the flashing lights of two sedans speeding in the opposite direction toward my house. Unmarked cars, federal plates. I smiled, right on time. The summons arrived less than 24 hours after I drove the Mustang off the driveway. Brittany worked fast. She was like a cornered rat, snapping and biting at anything that moved, desperate to regain control of the narrative before the truth could catch up to her. She didn't file for theft. She knew she couldn't win that. Instead, she filed for an emergency competency hearing. She filed a motion claiming that I, Raymond Coleman, was a danger to the family estate, citing my erratic behavior and reckless spending as grounds to strip me of my financial independence immediately. The courthouse was a place I knew well. I had spent years in these hallways filing permits, settling contract disputes, and dealing with unions. I knew the smell of floor wax and stale coffee. I knew that justice wasn't blind. It was usually just overworked and tired. But today the atmosphere felt different. It felt hostile. I sat on the hard oak bench on the right side of the courtroom. Marcus sat next to me. He was in his best suit, a charcoal gray three-piece that cost more than Brittany's car. He looked calm, flipping through a thick file of documents, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. We had the evidence. We had the recordings. We had the proof of the wire fraud, but we hadn't submitted it yet. Marcus wanted to wait. He wanted Brittany to speak on the record. He wanted her to lie under oath. On the other side of the aisle, Brittany sat next to a court-appointed lawyer who looked like he had just graduated from law school. She had dressed for the part. Gone were the designer heels and the sharp business suits. Today she was wearing a modest pastel-colored maternity dress that accentuated her baby bump. Her hair was down loose and slightly messy, giving her the appearance of a harried, exhausted mother-to-be. She held a tissue in her hand, dabbing at eyes that I knew were dry. Derek sat behind her, his head in his hands, looking like a man waiting for the executioner to pull the lever. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. Judge Harrison walked in. My heart sank. I knew Harrison. He was an old-school conservative, a man who believed in the sanctity of the nuclear family above all else. He was the kind of judge who looked at a pregnant woman and saw a saint, and looked at a black man with a classic car and saw a midlife crisis or a liability. Harrison sat down, adjusting his glasses. He looked at the file in front of him, then looked over his spectacles at me. His gaze was cold. It was the look of a man who had already made up his mind before the opening statements were even read. "We are here for an emergency guardianship hearing regarding Mr. Raymond Coleman," Harrison said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "The petitioner, Mrs. Brittany Coleman, alleges that Mr. Coleman is suffering from cognitive decline and is dissipating family assets at an alarming rate. Counsel, proceed." Brittany's young lawyer stood up. He was nervous, but he had a script. "Your Honor," he began, gesturing toward Brittany. "My client is in a desperate situation. She and her husband have been caring for Mr. Coleman for months. They have sacrificed their privacy, their finances, and their mental health to keep him safe at home. But in the last 48 hours, Mr. Coleman's behavior has escalated from forgetful to destructive." He paused for effect, walking toward the judge's bench. "While the family is facing a lien on their home due to a construction error, an error Mr. Coleman himself caused by interfering with the workers, Mr. Coleman disappeared. He returned yesterday driving a vintage sports car valued at over $250,000. The judge's eyebrows shot up. $250,000. "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer continued. "The family is struggling to pay a $50,000 city fine to save their home. Yet Mr. Coleman, in a fit of mania, went out and purchased a luxury vehicle. He prioritized a toy over the roof over his grandchild's head. This is clear evidence of financial incompetence and a lack of judgment consistent with dementia. We are asking the court to freeze his accounts immediately and grant temporary guardianship to Mrs. Coleman so she can liquidate the vehicle and save the family home." It was a beautiful lie. It took the facts and twisted them until they were unrecognizable. She didn't mention she sold the car first. She didn't mention the fraud. She just painted a picture of a selfish, senile old man blowing the family inheritance on a hot rod while his pregnant daughter-in-law wept in the ruins of their house. Judge Harrison turned to Brittany. "Mrs. Coleman, do you have anything to add?" Brittany stood up slowly, placing a protective hand on her belly. She sniffled loudly. "Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling perfectly, "I love Ray. He is my father-in-law. I have tried so hard. I cook for him. I clean for him. I even set up a room in the basement because he said the stairs were hurting his knees. I gripped the edge of the table. A room in the basement because of my knees. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. But he is just not the same anymore. She continued, wiping a fake tear. He gets aggressive. He forgets who I am. And when he drove up in that car yesterday, I just broke down. We don't have money for groceries, Your Honor. And he spent $250,000 on a car. I just want to protect him from himself. I want to make sure there is something left for the baby. She sat down, burying her face in Derek's shoulder. Derek didn't hug her back. He just sat there frozen, a statue of shame. Judge Harrison looked at me. The disgust on his face was plain to see. Mr. Coleman, the judge, said, his voice sharp. I am looking at the financial report here. Your accounts show significant activity, and I see a police report from 2 days ago where officers were called to your residence for a domestic disturbance. That was when she locked me out, I wanted to shout. That was when she framed me. But I stayed silent. Marcus placed a hand on my arm, squeezing it gently. Not yet, his grip said. Let him finish. Mr. Coleman, the judge, continued, taking my silence for confusion. Do you deny that you are in possession of a 1967 Mustang Shelby GT500? I stood up slowly. No, Your Honor, I have the car. And do you deny that your family is currently facing a significant financial crisis involving a city lien? No, Your Honor, I said. There is a lien. The judge shook his head, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. It is always tragic to see a man of your age lose his way. You have a family here that clearly cares about you. A young woman about to bring a life into the world, and she is here begging for the right to take care of you while you are out joyriding. He wasn't asking me questions anymore. He was lecturing me. He had bought her story hook, line, and sinker. He saw a pregnant white woman crying and an old black man with a fast car, and his bias filled in the rest of the blanks. Brittany was peeking through her fingers, watching me. I saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward. She thought she had won. She thought the gavel was about to come down and hand her the keys to my kingdom. I looked at Marcus. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. Your Honor, Marcus said, standing up smoothly. We understand the court's concern. However, the narrative presented by Mrs. Coleman is incomplete. The judge sighed, looking annoyed. Counsel, we are short on time. Unless you have proof that your client did not purchase that vehicle while the family is in debt, I am inclined to grant the temporary emergency order. The assets need to be protected. We do not deny he has the vehicle, Marcus said, calm as a frozen lake, but we strongly contest the context, and we would like to submit evidence that challenges Mrs. Coleman's suitability as a guardian. This is an emergency hearing, the judge snapped. We are not doing a full discovery phase. I need to make a decision today to protect this estate, and you shall, Marcus said. But before you sign away a man's freedom, Your Honor, I believe you should hear the petitioner's own words. Not the words she speaks here today, but the words she speaks when she thinks no one is listening. Brittany froze. Her hand dropped from her face. She looked at Marcus, then at me. For the first time, the confidence flickered. What are you talking about? The judge asked, frowning. Mr. Coleman, Marcus said, turning to me. I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a gun. I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a small black USB drive. This, Your Honor, I said, my voice ringing clear and strong, shedding the persona of the frail old man completely, is a recording taken from inside the nursery of my home. It was recorded 3 days ago. Objection, Brittany's lawyer shouted, jumping up. Illegal wiretapping, privacy violation. The nursery is in my house, I said, staring at the judge. The house I own, the house I pay the mortgage on. There is no expectation of privacy in common areas for guests who are living there rent-free. Judge Harrison paused. He looked at the USB drive in my hand. He looked at Brittany, who had gone pale, her hands gripping the table so hard her knuckles were white. What is on that drive, Mr. Coleman? The judge asked. The truth, Your Honor, I said. The truth about the car, the truth about the lien, and the truth about who exactly is trying to rob who. Brittany stood up, knocking her chair over. This is ridiculous. He is senile. He is making things up. Don't listen to him. Sit down, Mrs. Coleman, the judge roared, slamming his gavel. The room went deadly silent. The judge looked at me. He looked at the drive. He was a conservative man, yes. He was biased, yes. But he was also a man who hated being made a fool of in his own courtroom. And Brittany's outburst, her sudden shift from weeping willow to screaming banshee, had planted a seed of doubt. "I will take the evidence into chambers," the judge said, holding out his hand. "We will recess for 30 minutes. I walked forward and placed the drive in the bailiff's hand. As I turned to go back to my seat, I passed Brittany. She was trembling, but this time it was real. "You better pray," I whispered as I walked past her, "because that judge is about to hear you call him a predictable old fool in that recording." I sat down. Brittany looked at me with pure terror. She realized then that the silence I had maintained wasn't weakness. It was the deep breath before the plunge. The judge disappeared behind the heavy oak doors. The clock on the wall ticked, and for the first time in weeks I smiled. The gavel banged down, signaling a 30-minute recess while Judge Harrison reviewed the evidence I had submitted. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot, but for me it sounded like a starting pistol. Brittany was huddled with her court-appointed lawyer, her face a mask of frantic whispering and wild hand gestures. She was trying to spin the narrative, trying to find a way to explain away whatever might be on that drive. She looked over her shoulder at me. Her eyes narrowed with a mixture of fear and hatred. She didn't know exactly what I had recorded, but she knew her foundation was cracking. I didn't look at her. My eyes were fixed on the man sitting behind her, my son. Derek was slumped in his chair, staring at the scuff marks on the linoleum floor. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The arrogance he had displayed when he stood by Brittany's side at the house was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of doubt. He was a man who was beginning to realize he was standing on quicksand. I stood up and buttoned my suit jacket. I turned to Marcus. "Give me 5 minutes," I said. Marcus looked at Derek, then back at me. "Be careful, Ray. He is still under her spell." "Not for long," I said. I walked across the aisle. Brittany's lawyer saw me coming and stepped in front of her like a human shield. "Mr. Coleman, you are not supposed to approach the petitioner," he said nervously. "I am not here for her," I said, my voice low and hard. "I am here for my son." I looked at Derek. "Get up." Derek looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Dad, I can't," Brittany said. "I don't care what she said," I interrupted, but I kept my voice gentle. "I am not asking you as a plaintiff. I am asking you as your father. I have something in my pocket that belongs to you. You can either look at it here in front of everyone, or you can walk with me to the hallway and look at it like a man." Brittany grabbed Derek's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. "Don't go, Derek. He is trying to manipulate you. He is trying to get into your head." I looked at her hand on his arm. Then I looked into Derek's eyes. "She is scared, Derek," I said softly. "Ask yourself why." Derek looked at Brittany's desperate face, then he looked at me. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of the boy I raised, the boy who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters. He realized that the monster might be the one holding his arm. He pulled his arm away. "I will be right back," he muttered to her. "Derek, no," she hissed, but he was already standing up. We walked out of the courtroom and into the long, sterile hallway. I led him to a quiet alcove near the water fountains, away from the prying eyes of the bailiffs and the lawyers. The hum of the vending machine was the only sound. Derek leaned against the wall, crossing his arms defensively. "Make it quick, Dad. If you are just going to tell me I am an idiot, save your breath. I know you hate her." "I don't hate her," I said, standing in front of him. "Hate takes energy. I don't waste energy on parasites. I just remove them." I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out my phone and a folded piece of paper. "I brought you here because there are things a man should not hear in a public courtroom," I said. "I wanted to give you the dignity of finding this out in private." "What is it?" he asked, eyeing the phone. I unlocked the screen. I navigated to the audio file I had transferred from the recorder in the bear. It was a different file than the one I gave the judge. The judge had the evidence of fraud. This was evidence of character. "Maya put a recorder in the nursery," I said. Derek's eyes widened. "She what?" "That is illegal." "Maybe," I said. "But it was necessary. This was recorded 3 nights ago while you were at the gym. Brittany was on the phone with a man named Julian." Derek stiffened. "Julian is her business partner. They are launching the cosmetics line." Just listen, I said, and I pressed play. The sound was crystal clear. Brittany's voice filled the small hallway. He is so pathetic, Julian. I swear sometimes I look at him and I want to vomit. Derek flinched as if he had been slapped. He actually thinks he is going to be a father. Brittany's voice continued, accompanied by a cruel laugh. He was crying over the ultrasound today, talking about how the baby has his nose. I almost laughed in his face, as if a strong, handsome man like you could make a baby that looks like that weak little man. Derek's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Don't worry, babe, Brittany said on the recording. Once the old man kicks the bucket and we get the house money, I will file for divorce. I will take half of everything plus child support. We will be set for life. And Derek, that stupid black boy, will be paying for your kid for the next 18 years. He is so desperate to be loved, he will believe anything. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Derek was shaking. His hands were trembling so hard he had to grip the sides of his pants. He looked like he was having a seizure. That is AI, he stammered, his voice high and thin. That is fake. She loves me. She calls me her soulmate. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just handed him the folded piece of paper. This isn't AI, son, I said. This is science. He took the paper. It was a report from a private genetic lab. I took a sample from her hairbrush and the amniotic fluid results she left in the trash. I lied smoothly about the method to protect my sources, but the results were real. I ran a kinship test against your DNA profile from the ancestry kit we did last Christmas. Derek read the paper. His eyes scanned the lines, the numbers, the percentages. Probability of paternity 0.00%. He read it again and again. He let out a sound that I will never forget. It wasn't a cry. It was a howl, a low, guttural sound of an animal caught in a trap. He crumpled the paper in his fist and slid down the wall until he was crouching on the floor. He buried his face in his hands and sobbed. He cried for the baby he thought was his. He cried for the marriage he thought was real. He cried for the betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. I knelt down beside him. I didn't touch him. I let him feel the pain. He needed to feel it. He needed to burn out the infection so he could heal. She called me. He choked out, unable to repeat the slur. She showed you who she is, I said softly. She doesn't see you as a man, Derek. She sees you as a wallet. She sees you as a stepping stone. And she sees your race, your heritage, my heritage as a joke. Derek looked up. His eyes were no longer sad. They were wild. They were filled with a murderous rage that terrified me. He stood up so fast he almost lost his balance. He looked toward the courtroom doors. I am going to kill her, he whispered. He didn't scream it. He said it with a cold, deadly certainty. He started to march toward the doors. His fists were clenched tight enough to break bone. He was going to walk into that courtroom and wrap his hands around her throat and squeeze until the life left her body. Derek, stop, I commanded. He ignored me. He kept walking. I moved faster than I had in 20 years. I grabbed his shoulder and spun him around, slamming him back against the wall. Let me go, Dad, he roared, trying to shove past me. She is in there. She is laughing at me. I am going to tear her apart. No, I shouted, getting in his face. Look at me. He struggled against me, but I held him. I was old, but I was made of iron, and he was made of grief. If you go in there and touch her, you lose everything I said, staring into his wild eyes. You go to prison, Derek. You become the violent black man they already think you are. You give her exactly what she wants. She will play the victim. She will sue you. She will take everything, and you will rot in a cell while she laughs with Julian on a beach somewhere. Derek stopped struggling, but he was vibrating with tension. But she is trash, I said firmly. And you don't dirty your hands with trash. You take it out. He slumped against the wall, the fight draining out of him, leaving only exhaustion. Then what do I do? He wept. I can't look at her. I can't sit next to her. You have to, I said, gripping his shoulders. This is the test, Derek. This is the moment you become a man. You are going to wipe your face. You are going to straighten your tie. And you are going to walk back into that courtroom and sit next to her. Why, he asked, his voice broken. Because we are not just going to divorce her, I said, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We are going to bury her. I have the fraud evidence, but I need more. I need to know where the money is now. I need to know who Julian is and where he operates. I need you to be my eyes and ears. I need you to go back in there and hold her hand," I continued. "I need you to tell her that everything is going to be okay. I need you to let her think she is safe. Because when people feel safe, they make mistakes. And when she makes the next mistake, we will be there to catch it." Derek looked at me. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. He looked at the crumpled DNA test in his hand. He smoothed it out and put it in his inside pocket right next to his heart. "I will do it," he said, his voice sounding hollow. "You don't do it for me," I said. "You do it for your dignity." He nodded. He adjusted his collar. He looked at his reflection in the glass of the vending machine. He didn't look like my son anymore. He looked like a soldier going into enemy territory. "I am ready," he said. We walked back toward the courtroom doors. Just before we entered, Derek stopped. "Dad," he whispered. "Yeah, son. I am sorry. For the garage, for the car, for everything." I put a hand on his back. "We will build a new garage," I said. "And we will restore the car. But first we have to take out the trash." He nodded grimly and pushed the doors open. Brittany looked up as we entered. She scanned Derek's face looking for signs of our conversation. She looked nervous. Derek walked straight to the table. He sat down next to her. He didn't look at her. He just reached out and took her hand. Brittany relaxed instantly. She let out a breath she had been holding. She smirked at me, thinking she had won, thinking her hold on him was unbreakable. She didn't feel the coldness of his hand. She didn't notice that he didn't squeeze back. She didn't know that she was holding the hand of the man who would sign her warrant. I sat down next to Marcus. "How did it go?" Marcus whispered. I looked at Derek, staring straight ahead at the judge's empty chair. "He is awake," I said. The bailiff announced the judge's return. The recess was over, but the real trial had just begun. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and expensive cologne, the kind that tries too hard to mask the scent of desperation. I sat on the hard wooden bench, my hands resting calmly on my cane, watching the theater of the absurd unfold before me. This was the main event. The emergency hearing had been a skirmish, but this was the war. Brittany had brought out the heavy artillery. She had fired her court-appointed lawyer, the young man who had stumbled through the first hearing, and replaced him with Vincent Thorne. Thorne was a shark in a $3,000 suit, a man known for shredding reputations and burying the truth under mountains of legal paperwork. Thorne paced in front of the judge's bench like a caged predator. He was loud, aggressive, and theatrical. He painted a picture of me that was so distorted I almost didn't recognize myself. According to him, I was a senile tyrant, a man whose mind had been eaten away by dementia, leaving behind only paranoia and a reckless disregard for my family's financial safety. "Your Honor," Thorne boomed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "We are not here to punish Mr. Coleman. We are here to save him. We have medical records indicating a history of confusion. We have police reports of domestic disturbances. And most damning of all, we have a pattern of financial hemorrhaging that threatens to leave this entire family destitute." Brittany sat behind him, weeping softly into a handkerchief. She was wearing black today, a mourning color, as if she were already grieving the man she was trying to legally erase. Derek sat next to her, holding her hand just as I had instructed him to. He looked pale, like a man who hadn't slept in a week, but he held his ground. He played the part of the devoted husband, anchoring her performance with his silent presence. I watched Brittany peek through her tears to gauge the judge's reaction. Judge Harrison was listening intently. He was a conservative man, a man who respected order and hierarchy. Thorne knew this. He was playing to the judge's bias, painting Brittany as the dutiful daughter-in-law stepping up to carry the burden of an invalid patriarch. And then came the moment we had been waiting for. Thorne walked back to his table and picked up a document. He held it aloft like Moses holding the commandments. "Your Honor." Thorne said, his voice dropping to a grave whisper. "The defense will try to argue that Mrs. Coleman is acting out of greed. They will try to paint this as a hostile takeover. But this document proves otherwise. This is a durable power of attorney signed by Raymond Coleman himself 6 months ago." The courtroom went silent. I saw the judge lean forward. "In this document," Thorne continued, "Mr. Coleman voluntarily surrendered control of his financial and medical decisions to my client. He acknowledged his own declining health. He asked for help. And now in his confusion, he is attacking the very woman he asked to protect him." Thorne handed the document to the bailiff, who walked it up to the bench. Judge Harrison put on his reading glasses. He scanned the paper. He looked at the signature. "It appears to be in order," the judge muttered. "The signature is shaky, but it matches the samples provided." Brittany let out a sob of relief. It was a perfect sound, a sound designed to elicit sympathy. Thorne smirked at my lawyer, Marcus. He thought it was checkmate. He thought he had just produced the smoking gun that would end the trial. He had no idea he was holding a live grenade. Marcus stood up. He didn't rush. He buttoned his jacket, slowly smoothed his tie, and walked toward the center of the room. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at Brittany. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice calm and conversational. "Mr. Thorne is correct about one thing. That document is indeed the centerpiece of this case. If it is valid, then my client has no standing, and Mrs. Coleman is the legal guardian." Thorne nodded arrogantly. "Exactly. Case closed." However, Marcus continued, turning to face the judge. "A legal document is only as good as the integrity of the people who execute it. A power of attorney requires two things to be valid: a competent signer and a licensed notary public to witness that signature and verify that no duress was involved." I saw Brittany stiffen. She stopped crying. Her eyes darted to Thorne. The judge looked over his glasses. "Get to the point, counselor." Marcus walked to our table and picked up a single sheet of paper. "Your Honor, I would like to draw the court's attention to the notary stamp on the bottom of that power of attorney. The name on the stamp is Jennifer Caldwell." The judge looked at the document. "Yes, Jennifer Caldwell. Commission number 45922. What of it?" "Ms. Caldwell is a college friend of Mrs. Coleman," Marcus said. "They were sorority sisters at State University." Thorne jumped up. "Objection. Relevance. Who cares who the notary is as long as she is licensed?" "I am getting to that," Marcus said sharply, cutting him off. He handed the paper to the bailiff. "This is a certified letter from the State Licensing Board," Marcus said. "As Your Honor can see, Ms. Jennifer Caldwell was stripped of her notary commission 2 years ago." The silence that fell over the room was heavy and suffocating. She was disbarred from practicing. Marcus continued, his voice rising slightly, finding its rhythm. "Following a conviction for real estate fraud. She notarized deeds for houses that were sold without the owner's knowledge. She is currently serving a probation sentence that explicitly forbids her from acting as a witness to any legal document." Judge Harrison froze. He looked at the paper Marcus had submitted, then he looked at the power of attorney in his hand. His face, which had been stern but neutral, began to turn a shade of red that I recognized well. It was the color of a man who realizes he is being played. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, his voice low and dangerous, "are you aware that you just submitted a fraudulent document to this court?" Thorne looked like someone had punched him in the gut. He snatched the paper from the bailiff, scanning it frantically. He turned to Brittany. "Is this true?" he hissed. Brittany was shaking her head violently. "No, I didn't know. Jennifer told me she was still licensed. She told me it was fine." Ray signed it. That is what matters. He signed it. "Whether he signed it or not is irrelevant." Mrs. Coleman, the judge boomed, slamming the paper down. "Without a valid witness, this piece of paper is trash. And the fact that you used a known fraudster, a personal friend with a criminal record, to witness a document giving you total control over a multi-million-dollar estate." The judge paused, taking a deep breath to control his temper. He took off his glasses and looked at Brittany with new eyes. The sympathy was gone. The image of the saintly mother-to-be had dissolved, leaving behind something much uglier. "This looks like conspiracy to commit fraud," the judge said. Brittany stood up, knocking her chair back. Her composure cracked. The mask slipped completely. "I was trying to help him," she screamed, pointing at me. "He is old. He doesn't know what he is doing. He was going to waste the money. I had to do it." "Sit down," Mrs. Coleman Thorne barked, grabbing her arm and pulling her back into her chair. "Shut up. Just shut up." But the damage was done. The wind in the courtroom had shifted so violently it had nearly blown the windows out. I looked at Derek. He was staring straight ahead, his face a mask of stone, just as we practiced. But I saw his hand clench into a fist under the table. He was watching his wife implode, and he was realizing just how deep the rot went. "Your Honor," Marcus said, stepping into the silence. "Since the power of attorney is invalid, the foundation of the petitioner's claim collapses. Mr. Coleman never relinquished his rights. And the fact that Mrs. Coleman attempted to use this forged authority to sell his vehicle and mortgage his home speaks to her intent. She is not a guardian. She is a predator." Thorne tried to salvage the situation. "Your Honor, my client was unaware of the notary's status. It was an administrative error. It does not prove malicious intent regarding Mr. Coleman's care. We still maintain that Mr. Coleman is incompetent." The judge looked at me. He looked at the man he had been ready to commit to an institution 10 minutes ago. "Mr. Coleman," the judge said, "you have remained very quiet. Do you have anything to say about your competence?" I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane, not because I needed it, but because it made me look distinguished. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear and strong, filling the room without shouting. "I built this city. I poured the concrete for the foundation of this very courthouse in 1985. I know a structural crack when I see one." I pointed at the document on the judge's bench. "That document is a crack," I said, "and the woman sitting there is the one holding the sledgehammer. I am not confused, Your Honor. I am heartbroken. I am heartbroken that the family I welcomed into my home tried to steal the roof over my head. But I am competent enough to know that when a snake enters your garden, you don't argue with it. You cut off its head." Brittany gasped. Thorne rubbed his temples, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Judge Harrison looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at Brittany. He picked up his gavel. "I am dismissing the emergency guardianship petition," the judge said. "Mr. Coleman retains full control of his person and estate." Brittany let out a wail of despair, but the judge wasn't finished. However, he continued, his eyes narrowing. "Given the revelation about this document and the allegations of fraud raised by Mr. Coleman's counsel, I am not just dismissing this case, I am forwarding the transcript of this hearing and that document to the district attorney's office." Brittany went pale. Thorne packed his briefcase in record time, signaling he was done. "We are not finished here," the judge said. "I want a full accounting of every penny spent from Mr. Coleman's accounts while he was under this alleged care. And Mrs. Coleman, if I find that you spent one dime of his money based on this void document, I will sign the arrest warrant myself." Brittany looked at Derek, begging him to do something, to say something. But Derek just sat there, holding her hand with a grip that was no longer comforting. It was a shackle. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw the reflection of her own end in his eyes. The bailiff called for the next case. I turned to walk out. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just walked past her, my head held high, leaving her drowning in the wreckage of her own greed. The first domino had fallen, and the rest were about to follow. The air in the courtroom had shifted from the stale scent of bureaucracy to the sharp, metallic smell of impending doom. Judge Harrison was still staring at the invalid power of attorney document with a look of pure disdain, his face flushing a deep crimson that matched the velvet of his chair. Brittany sat frozen, her hands gripping the table so hard her knuckles looked like polished bone. She knew the ground was crumbling beneath her, but she didn't know that the earthquake was just beginning. My lawyer Marcus didn't give her time to breathe. He didn't give the judge time to cool down. He stepped forward, his movements precise and lethal, like a matador preparing for the final strike. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. "While the fraudulent power of attorney is sufficient to dismiss the guardianship petition, we believe it is merely the tip of a much larger iceberg. We are not just dealing with a woman who wanted to control an elderly man's finances. We are dealing with a woman who has systematically engaged in the theft of high-value assets and attempted federal wire fraud." Brittany's lawyer, Vincent Thorne, jumped up, but his heart wasn't in it. "Objection," he stammered. "These are wild accusations. This is a family court, not a criminal tribunal." The judge looked over his spectacles, his eyes cold. "If crimes were committed against the estate in question, Mr. Thorne, they are relevant to this court. Proceed, counsel." Marcus walked back to our table and picked up a thick binder. He opened it to a page marked with a red tab. "Mrs. Coleman claimed in her opening statement that my client recklessly spent money on a vintage car," Marcus said, holding up a photograph of the Mustang. "She claimed he bought it while the family was in debt. The truth, however, is quite the opposite. Mr. Coleman did not buy this car yesterday. He has owned it for 15 years. What happened yesterday was a recovery operation." "Recovery?" Thorne asked, confused. "Yes," Marcus said, handing a document to the bailiff to pass to the judge. "This is a bill of sale dated 3 days ago. It shows that Mrs. Brittany Coleman sold a 1967 Shelby GT 500 to Miller's Scrap and Salvage for the sum of $12,000 cash." The judge looked at the paper. "12,000, he repeated, "for a Shelby." Marcus nodded. "A low price designed for a quick cash transaction to avoid scrutiny. However, we have included an independent appraisal of the vehicle in its fully restored condition." The judge flipped the page. His eyebrows shot up toward his hairline. He looked at the number, then he looked at Brittany. $250,000, the judge read aloud. The courtroom gasped. A murmur of shock rippled through the gallery. Brittany shrank in her seat. Your Honor, Marcus continued. In the state of Illinois, the theft of property valued over $100,000 is a Class 1 felony. It is grand larceny. By using a forged document to sell a vehicle she did not own, Mrs. Coleman did not just make a bad business decision, she committed a major felony. And since the vehicle was then sold to a buyer in Indiana, she effectively trafficked stolen goods across state lines. Brittany stood up her chair, scraping loudly against the floor. I didn't steal it, she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. It was in my garage. I was cleaning up. I thought it was junk. I didn't know it was worth that much. Ignorance of the value of stolen property is not a defense for stealing it, Mrs. Coleman, the judge snapped. Sit down. She sat, but she was trembling violently now. She looked at Derek, pleading with her eyes, but he was staring at the table, his jaw set like granite. We are not done, Your Honor, Marcus said. He turned to the next page in the binder. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the trap I had baited in the darkness of the basement. Yesterday morning, believing she had successfully institutionalized my client, Mrs. Coleman attempted to solve her financial problems by accessing what she believed to be Mr. Coleman's offshore savings. Brittany's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. She realized in that second that the conversation in the basement, the one where I stammered and forgot the account number, had been a performance. Mr. Coleman provided her with an account number for a bank in the Cayman Islands, Marcus explained. However, Mr. Coleman does not have a Cayman Islands account. That account number was a dummy account set up by my firm in cooperation with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division specifically to catch identity thieves targeting the elderly. The color drained from Brittany's face so completely she looked like a corpse. FBI Thorne whispered, dropping his pen. Marcus held up a computer log. This is a digital trace provided by the bank's security team. It shows a login attempt at 10:14 a.m. yesterday from an IP address registered to the Coleman residence. The user attempted to initiate a wire transfer of $300,000 using Mr. Coleman's social security number and the forged credentials. Marcus paused, looking directly at Brittany. That is wire fraud, Your Honor. It is a federal crime, and because it involves the attempted theft of assets from a senior citizen, it carries a mandatory sentencing enhancement. We have already forwarded this log to the U.S. Attorney's Office. The judge looked at the log. He looked at Brittany. The disgust on his face was replaced by something scarier. Indifference. He was looking at her not as a person, but as a case number, Mrs. Coleman, the judge said, his voice quiet and deadly. You came into my courtroom claiming this man was incompetent. You claimed he was a danger to himself. And all the while you were robbing him blind and trying to frame him for his own financial murder. Brittany broke. It wasn't me, she wailed, slamming her hands on the table. It wasn't my idea. I didn't want to do it. She spun around, grabbing Derek's lapels, shaking him. Tell them, she screamed. Tell them, Derek. You told me we needed the money. You said the construction fines would ruin us. You told me to handle it. I did this for you. I did this for our family. Derek sat there motionless as she shook him. The courtroom watched in stunned silence. The devoted wife, the pregnant mother, was now a cornered animal trying to drag anyone she could down into the pit with her. He knew she shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Derek's face. He knew about the car. He knew about the bank. He stood right there while I did it. Arrest him too. It was a conspiracy. We are partners. It was a suicide move. If she was going down, she was determined to take him with her. She thought that by implicating him, she could force him to defend her, or at least share the blame. She didn't realize she was handing him the knife to cut the cord. Derek slowly reached up and removed her hands from his jacket. He did it with the same detachment one might use to remove a spider. He stood up. He was a tall man, my son, but he had spent his whole life shrinking himself to fit into her world. Now he stood at his full height. He looked at the judge, then he looked at Brittany. I didn't know anything, Derek said. His voice was cold, flat, and devoid of emotion. Brittany froze. What? What are you saying? You were there. I was there. Derek continued, looking through her as if she were made of glass. But I didn't know you were forging signatures. I didn't know you were stealing. You told me it was legal. You told me Dad agreed to help us. You told me you were handling the paperwork because Dad's hands were too shaky to write. Liar, she screeched, clawing at his chest. You are a liar. You wanted the money just as much as I did. I wanted to save our home, Derek said, pushing her away gently but firmly. I didn't want to commit a felony, and I certainly didn't know that my wife was a criminal who would sell my father's legacy for pocket change. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, I would like to go on record. I had no knowledge of the fraud. I had no knowledge of the fake notary. And until 5 minutes ago, I believed my wife was trying to help my father. I see now that I was the one being deceived. You traitor! Brittany screamed, lunging at him. Her nails aimed for his face. The bailiff moved fast. He intercepted her, grabbing her arms and restraining her. She thrashed and kicked, screaming obscenities that made the court stenographer flinch. You are nothing without me, she howled, spitting at Derek. You are a weak, pathetic loser. I made you. Derek watched her struggle. He adjusted his tie. He looked at me across the aisle. I nodded. He had done it. It was brutal and it was ugly, but he had survived. I am done, Derek said quietly, but in the silence of the courtroom everyone heard it. I am done with the lies. I am done with the stealing. And I am done with you. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, if she is going to jail, I don't want to be the one to bail her out. I am asking the court to remove me from any liability regarding her actions. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. It sounded like a gunshot ending a war. Order, the judge bellowed. Bailiff, take Mrs. Coleman into custody. The court finds her in contempt, and given the flight risk associated with the federal charges, I am remanding her to the county jail pending the arrival of federal agents. No, Brittany screamed as the bailiff clicked the handcuffs onto her wrists. You can't do this. I am pregnant. You can't put a pregnant woman in jail. The judge looked down at her shuffling papers. The county jail has a medical ward, Mrs. Coleman. I suggest you save your strength for your federal arraignment. They dragged her out. Her screams echoed down the hallway long after the doors swung shut. The sound was terrible, but it was the sound of justice. The courtroom fell silent again. Derek stood alone at the defense table. He looked at the empty chair where his wife had sat. He looked at the handcuffs she had left on the table in her struggle. He turned and walked across the aisle. He didn't ask for permission. He walked straight to me. He looked at Marcus, then he looked at me. Let's go home, Dad, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I stood up, leaning on my cane. Not yet, son, I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. We have one stop to make first. We need to go to the impound lot. The Mustang needs a driver, and my knees are too tired to work the clutch today. Derek looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. He understood. It wasn't about the car, it was about trust. I was giving him the keys to the kingdom he thought he had lost. I would like that, he whispered. We walked out of the courtroom together, leaving the wreckage of his marriage behind and stepping into a future that was finally undeniably ours. The sound of the gavel hitting the wood was not a sharp crack. It was a dull, heavy thud like a coffin lid closing. Judge Harrison did not mince words. He looked down at Brittany with the kind of contempt usually reserved for violent criminals. He declared her unfit to serve as a guardian for anyone, let alone a man of my standing. He ordered the immediate restitution of $250,000 for the theft of the vehicle and another $50,000 for the damages to the city infrastructure caused by her illegal excavation. He placed a lien on her personal future earnings and froze every asset she had tried to hide. Brittany stood there trembling in her designer heels. She looked at the judge as if he were speaking a foreign language. She couldn't process the magnitude of the loss. In her mind, she was still the victim. She was still the clever girl who deserved the world. She opened her mouth to argue, to spin one last lie, but the judge raised a hand, silencing her. "We are done here, Mrs. Coleman," the judge said. "But I believe there are some gentlemen waiting for you in the hallway who are just getting started." The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. It wasn't the bailiff. It was two men in dark suits with badges clipped to their belts. They didn't run. They didn't shout. They walked with the terrifying calm of federal agents who have already built their case and are simply here to collect the body. Brittany turned around. She saw them, and she stopped breathing. She took a step back, bumping into the defense table. Mrs. Coleman, one of the agents, said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "We are with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to defraud a financial institution." "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, you can't. My lawyer, where is my lawyer?" She turned to Vincent Thorne. But Thorne was already packing his briefcase. He wouldn't look at her. He knew better than to stand between a federal indictment and its target. "I advise you to remain silent." Mrs. Coleman Thorne muttered, snapping his briefcase shut and walking away. The agents moved in. One of them reached for the handcuffs on his belt. Brittany backed away, her hands held up in front of her. "Wait!" she cried. "Wait, I can explain. It wasn't just me. I didn't do this alone. I have a partner." And right on cue, the courtroom doors opened again. A man burst in. He was tall, handsome in a slick, greasy way, wearing a suit that was too shiny and a watch that was too big. It was Julian, Brittany's lover, her business partner, the father of the baby she was carrying. Brittany's face lit up with a desperate hope. She thought he was here to save her. She thought he was here to pay her bail or hire a better lawyer. "Julian," she screamed, running toward him. "Julian, tell them. Tell them about the business. Tell them we had a deal." Julian didn't look at her. He looked past her. He looked angry. He was holding a crumpled piece of paper in his hand. He pushed past the federal agents, ignoring them completely, and stormed right up to the railing separating the gallery from the court floor. He pointed a finger at me. "You," he shouted, his face red with rage. "You are the owner, right? Raymond Coleman." Brittany froze. "Julian, what are you doing? They are arresting me." "Shut up, Brittany," Julian snapped without looking at her. He kept his eyes on me. "You reported the excavation to the city," Julian yelled, waving the paper. "You got my construction company blacklisted. Do you know how much money I am losing right now? They red-tagged 3 of my other job sites because of this." I leaned back on my cane and smiled. It was a slow, predatory smile. "Ah," I said calmly. "So you are the contractor, the one who hired the unlicensed diggers to cut corners on my property." "I am an investor," Julian corrected, puffing out his chest. "I own the development firm that was handling the ADU project. And you just cost me a fortune, old man. I am going to sue you for interference with a business contract." I laughed. The sound echoed off the high ceilings. "You are not going to sue anyone, son," I said. "You are going to join her." Julian looked confused. He looked at Brittany, then back at me. "What are you talking about?" "I didn't sign any papers. My name isn't on the fraud. I am clean." I reached into my inside pocket and pulled out a folded document. It was the report from Inspector Kowalski, the one from the water main break. "You are right," I said. "Your name isn't on the bank fraud, but your name is on the shell company that authorized illegal digging on a residential property. And when your crew hit that water main, they didn't just break a pipe. They polluted the water supply for 2 blocks. I paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "That is an environmental crime, Julian. And since you are the owner of record for the construction firm, that makes you personally liable. But that is not the best part." I stepped closer to the railing. "The best part is that when the city investigated your permit history, they found something interesting. You have been running a permit Ponzi scheme, taking deposits from materials you never buy and using the money to pay off previous debts. Inspector Kowalski found 6 other properties where you did the same thing, and guess who he called this morning?" Julian's arrogance vanished. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "He called the district attorney," I whispered. Julian spun around. He looked at the exit, but the 2 federal agents who were there for Brittany had been joined by 2 uniformed police officers. They were blocking the doors. Brittany stared at Julian. She looked at the man she had destroyed her marriage for, the man she had tried to steal my house for. You used me," she whispered. Julian turned on her, his face twisted into a snarl. "Used you," he spat. "You came to me. You said the old man was senile. You said the house was yours. You said you had the cash to fund the projects. You dragged me into this mess. I gave you everything," Brittany screamed. "I gave you the money from the car. I gave you my body. I am carrying your child." Julian laughed. It was a cruel, heartless sound. "My child," he scoffed. "How do I know that is mine? You cheated on your husband to be with me. Who is to say you aren't cheating on me too?" Brittany looked like she had been shot. She staggered back. The betrayal was total. She had burned her world to the ground for this man, and he was stepping over her ashes to save himself. "Officers, arrest him," I said, pointing at Julian. "That is the man who authorized the destruction of my property. And I believe if you check his pockets, you will find the cash from the sale of my stolen Mustang." The police moved in. Julian tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. They tackled him against the wall. As they cuffed him, he kept screaming that it was all Brittany's idea, that he was a victim. The federal agents turned back to Brittany. She was standing alone in the center of the room. Derek was gone, having walked out moments before, unable to watch the final act of this tragedy. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, pleading, terrified. "Ray," she whimpered. "Ray, please, I am scared. Don't let them take me. I am family." I looked at her. I looked at the dress she was wearing. It was a silk dress, white and pristine, bought from a boutique on Michigan Avenue. It probably cost $2,000. $2,000 of the money she got from selling my memories to a scrapyard. I looked at the diamond earrings she wore. I looked at the manicured nails. Everything about her was fake. Everything about her was stolen. "You are not family," I said, my voice devoid of pity. "You are a tenant who got evicted." The agent took her arm. He spun her around. "Brittany Coleman, you are under arrest." She didn't fight this time. She didn't scream. She just collapsed. The agent had to hold her up to put the cuffs on. The metal clicked shut around her wrists, biting into the soft skin. They marched her out. I watched as they led her past the table where she had sat so confidently just an hour ago. She looked at the empty chair where Derek had been. She looked at the judge, who was writing notes in his ledger, ignoring her completely. As they reached the doors, she looked back at me one last time. "What about the baby?" she cried. "What about your grandchild?" I tapped my cane on the floor. "That child is innocent," I said, "and when it is born, we will make sure it goes to a home where it learns the value of hard work, not a home where it learns how to steal." The doors closed. The silence returned. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the last few weeks lift off my shoulders. It was over. The house was safe. The car was safe. And the cancer that had been eating away at my family had been cut out. Marcus packed up his files. He walked over to me and put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Ray?" he asked. I looked at the closed doors. "I am tired, Marcus," I said, "but I am clean." We walked out of the courtroom together. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me but the ghost of a woman who thought she could outsmart a man who had built skyscrapers from the mud up. She thought she was playing a game. She didn't know I was the one who built the board. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung shut behind the federal agents, sealing off the screams of the woman who had tried to bury me. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. It was filled with the dust of a battle that had destroyed a family to save a legacy. I stood at the railing, gripping the handle of my cane, feeling the vibrations of the floorboards settle. My lawyer Marcus began gathering his papers into his briefcase, clicking the locks with a sound that felt final. But we were not alone. Derek was still there. He stood by the defense table, looking at the empty chair where his wife had sat just moments before. He looked like a man who had survived a plane crash, only to realize he was stranded on a deserted island. He loosened his tie, his chest heaving with shallow breaths. He ran a hand over his face, wiping away the sweat and the shame. Then he turned to me. The look on his face shifted. The terror of the last hour melted away, replaced by a look I knew well. It was the look of a child who had broken a window and managed to blame the neighborhood bully. It was a look of relief mixed with a pathetic, eager hope. He thought the storm had passed. He thought that because the lightning had struck Brittany, he was safe from the thunder. He walked toward me, stepping over the spot where Brittany had been handcuffed. He didn't look down. He walked right up to the bar that separated us and offered a tentative, trembling smile. "Dad," he exhaled, letting the word hang in the air like a peace offering. "It is over. Thank God it is over." I didn't smile back. I didn't move. I just watched him. I watched the way he smoothed his jacket, trying to regain some semblance of dignity that he had lost months ago. "She was a monster," Derek said, shaking his head. "You were right, Dad. You were right about everything. I should have listened to you. I don't know how she blinded me like that. She manipulated me. She used me." He chuckled, a dry, nervous sound. "But we got her, didn't we? That move with the fake bank account. That was genius, Dad. Pure genius. I knew you still had it. I knew you were sharper than her." He reached out as if to pat my shoulder, but stopped when he saw the look in my eyes. He pulled his hand back. "Look, I know things have been rough," he continued, talking faster now, filling the silence that I refused to break. "I know I made mistakes. I was weak. I admit that. But she is gone now. She is going to jail for a long time. It is just us now, Dad. You and me. Like it used to be." He took a deep breath, puffing out his chest. I will move back into the main house. I will help you fix up the damage she did to the yard. We can get the Mustang running perfectly. I will take over the bills again, but this time I will do it right. No more secrets. We can start fresh. I am the only family you have left, Dad. We have to stick together. He truly believed it. I could see it in his eyes. He believed that blood was a get-out-of-jail-free card. He believed that because he had stood up at the very last second when the ship was already sinking that he deserved a medal. He thought that simply surviving the fire made him a hero. I looked at Marcus. My lawyer looked back at me, his face grim. He knew what was coming. He picked up his briefcase and walked to the back of the room, giving us privacy. I turned back to my son. "Kneel," I said. Derek blinked. "What?" I pointed to the floor with my cane. "Kneel down." Derek looked around the empty courtroom. He looked confused, but the habit of obedience was deep in his bones. He slowly lowered himself onto one knee on the hard linoleum floor. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and wet, like a puppy waiting for a treat. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I am so sorry for everything. Please forgive me." I looked down at the top of his head. I remembered holding him when he was a baby, marveling at how small his hands were. I remembered teaching him to walk on the job sites, holding his hand as he balanced on the beams. I had spent 40 years trying to build a man. I had poured my strength, my wisdom, and my money into him. I thought I was building a skyscraper, but I realized now I had only built a facade. "You are asking for forgiveness," I said, my voice low and rumble. "Yes," he choked out. "Please. I am your son." I leaned forward, resting my weight on the cane. "Being a son is not a title, Derek," I said. "It is a job description. It means you protect the foundation. It means you honor the name. You didn't do that." But I was scared, he pleaded. "She threatened me." "I was scared in Vietnam," I said. "I was scared when the bank threatened to foreclose on my first shop. I was scared when your mother died and left me alone with a 10-year-old boy. Fear is not an excuse for cowardice." I stepped back, giving myself room. "You watched her lock me in a basement, Derek. You ate dinner upstairs while I ate cold scraps in the dark. You stepped over me to get to the door. You signed papers that you knew were wrong because it was easier than fighting her. But I stood up today," he argued. "I testified against her." "You testified because the ship was sinking," I said. "You didn't jump off to save me. You jumped off to save yourself. You are not a victim, Derek. You are an accomplice who turned state's evidence." Derek began to cry in earnest now. Great heaving sobs that shook his shoulders. He grabbed the hem of my jacket. "Don't do this, Dad, please. I have nowhere to go. She spent all our money. The accounts are frozen. I don't have a job. I don't have a home. If you turn your back on me, I am dead." I looked at him and I felt a pain in my chest that was sharper than any heart attack. This was the hardest thing I had ever done. Harder than burying my wife. Harder than building the business. Because burying the dead is natural, but burying the living is a choice. But I knew that if I let him back in, he would never change. He would wait for me to die, and then he would squander everything I had built on the next predator who smiled at him. He was a leak in the hull, and you cannot sail a ship with a leak. I reached into my inside pocket. I pulled out my checkbook. It was the old leather one, the one I had carried for 30 years. I clicked my pen. Derek watched me, hope flaring in his eyes again. He thought I was writing him a lifeline. He thought I was paying off his debts. I wrote the date. I wrote his name. And then I wrote the number. $15,000. I tore the check out with a sharp rip. The sound echoed in the quiet room. I held it out to him. "What is this?" Derek asked, looking at the check through his tears. "Take it," I ordered. He reached up with a shaking hand and took the small slip of paper. He stared at the amount. 15,000, he whispered. "That is the price," I said. "The price of what?" "That is the price Brittany told me she got for the Mustang," I said. "That is the number she put on my dignity, and that is the number you accepted. You stood there and let her sell my life's work for $15,000 because you thought it would buy you some peace." I tapped the check in his hand. "So that is the value of your loyalty, Derek. $15,000. I am paying you off." Derek looked up at me, horror dawning on his face. "Dad, no. I don't want the money. I want to come home." "You don't have a home," I said, my voice cold as steel. "You sold your home when you let that woman put a lock on my door." I turned away from him, walking toward the aisle. "Dad, please," he screamed, scrambling to his feet. "You can't leave me. I am your flesh and blood." I stopped. I didn't turn around. My flesh and blood has a spine, I said. My flesh and blood stands up for what is right. I don't know who you are, but you are not a Coleman. I began to walk away. Dad, he wailed, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? That check will clear in the morning, I called back without breaking my stride. It is enough for a used car and a deposit on an apartment in another city. I suggest you find one. Because if you come back to my house, Derek, if you ever step foot on my property again, I will treat you like any other trespasser. I walked past Marcus, who held the door open for me. He looked at me with deep sadness, but also with respect. I walked out into the hallway. The air was cooler out here. I could hear Derek sobbing behind the closed doors, a sound of total desolation. It hurt. God, it hurt. Every step away from him felt like tearing off a limb, but I kept walking. I walked toward the exit where the sun was shining through the glass doors. I walked toward the parking lot where my Mustang was waiting. I had cut out the cancer. The wound would bleed for a long time. It might never fully heal, but the infection was gone. The rot was gone. I pushed open the doors and stepped into the afternoon light. I was 71 years old. I was alone. But as I took a deep breath of the free air, I realized something. I was still standing. I gripped my cane, straightened my back, and walked toward my car. The engine was cold, but I knew it would start. It always started. And so would I. The garage didn't smell like destruction anymore. It smelled like 50-weight motor oil and Old Spice. It smelled like peace. 6 months had passed since the gavel came down in that courtroom, and in that time the wounds on my property had healed, even if the scars on my heart remained. The hole in the backyard where Brittany had tried to bury my dignity was filled in. The grass had grown back thick and green, covering the mud and the shame. The main house was quiet. No construction crews, no screaming matches, no fake laughter from a daughter-in-law plotting my demise. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of jazz playing softly from the radio in the corner. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and leaned against the workbench, watching the pair of legs sticking out from under the chassis of the Mustang. They were wearing oil-stained coveralls that were 2 sizes too big, but I had never seen a better fit. "Okay, Grandpa," the voice echoed from under the car. "I think I got the oil filter tight. Hand tight just like you said, not torque wrench tight. Come on out," I said, tapping the fender with my cane. "Let's check your work." Maya slid out from under the blue beast on the creeper. She sat up, wiping a smudge of grease from her cheek with the back of her hand. She wasn't the scared, sullen teenager hiding in the attic anymore. She was 16 going on 30 with eyes that had seen too much, but a smile that was finally learning to reach them. She stood up, brushing off her knees. She looked at me, waiting for approval. I walked over and popped the hood. I checked the dipstick. I ran my hand along the filter housing. Dry, clean, perfect. "You have good hands, kid," I said, nodding. "Better than the mechanics at the dealership. They just want to get it done fast. You want to get it done right." Maya beamed. She picked up a wrench, weighing it in her hand. "It is satisfying," she said. "Fixing things, making them run again. It makes sense. If something is broken, you find the problem and you replace it. People are harder." I looked at her. She was talking about her father. We didn't talk about Derek often. We knew he was somewhere in Ohio working at a warehouse, living in a small apartment. He sent letters sometimes. Maya put them in a shoebox under her bed. She hadn't opened one yet. She wasn't ready, and I didn't push her. Healing doesn't have a schedule. People are complicated. I agreed, closing the hood with a solid thud. But you are right. Sometimes you have to strip the engine down to the block to see if it is worth saving. And sometimes you realize the block is cracked and you just have to swap it out. I walked over to the small refrigerator in the corner and pulled out 2 glass bottles of root beer. I handed one to her. We clinked bottles a toast to a job well done. I looked around the garage. It was fully restored now, better than before. The tools were organized on the pegboard. The floor was epoxy-coated. And in the center sat the Mustang, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. It wasn't just a car. It was the survivor. It was the witness. "You know, Maya," I said, taking a sip of the cold soda, "this car is yours." She froze mid-sip. She looked at me, her eyes wide. "What?" "No, Grandpa. You said I could drive it when I get my license. You didn't say it was mine." "It is yours," I said firmly. "Not today. You are not ready for this kind of horsepower yet. You need to learn respect for the road first." but on paper it is yours." I walked over to the workbench and picked up a thick manila envelope. I had just come back from Marcus's office yesterday. The ink was barely dry. I handed it to her. "What is this?" she asked, putting down her drink. "That is a trust," I said. "It is called the Maya Coleman Revocable Trust." She opened it, pulling out the legal documents. She scanned the pages, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of the lawyer talk. I decided to simplify it for her. "It says that when you turn 25, this house belongs to you," I explained. "It says that this car belongs to you. And it says that the investment portfolio I built over 40 years belongs to you." Maya stopped reading. She looked up at me. "Portfolio," she whispered. "Grandpa." "How much is it? Brittany said you were broke. She said you only had the house." Brittany saw what she wanted to see. I said, my voice hardening slightly at the mention of her name. She saw an old man in flannel shirts and assumed I was scraping by on Social Security. She didn't know about the apartment complexes I built in the 80s. She didn't know about the land I bought when the market crashed in 2008. She didn't look past the surface. I stepped closer to my granddaughter. "The portfolio is valued at a little over $5 million, Maya." The envelope slipped from her hands and hit the floor. She stared at me. $5 million. I nodded. "Brittany destroyed her life for $50,000, I said. "She committed felonies. She went to prison. She lost her marriage. All for a fraction of what I would have given freely if she had just shown me an ounce of respect." Maya looked down at the papers on the floor as if they were radioactive. "Why 25? She asked, her voice quiet. "Because money is like this car," I said, gesturing to the Mustang. "It is powerful. If you give it to a child, they will crash. They will hurt themselves and everyone around them. Look at your father. I gave him too much too soon. I cushioned his falls. I made him weak." I put a hand on her shoulder. "I am not going to make you weak, Maya. I am going to make you dangerous. By the time you get this money, you will have finished college. You will have a career. You will know the value of $1 because you will have earned your own. This money won't be your life. It will just be the fuel in your tank." Maya bent down and picked up the envelope. She held it respectfully like it was a holy book. "I won't let you down, Grandpa," she said. "I won't be like them." "I know you won't," I said. "You have your grandmother's spirit, and you have my hands. That is a winning combination." I checked my watch. The sun was starting to set, casting long golden shadows across the driveway. The light caught the chrome bumper of the Mustang, making it flare like a star. "Grab the keys," I said. Maya's eyes lit up. "You are going to let me drive." "Not today," I laughed. "Today you are the navigator. I am the pilot. But we need to take her out. A car like this, it is a sin to keep it caged up. She needs to breathe. She needs to run." Maya ran to the key hook and grabbed the silver pony keychain. She tossed them to me. I caught them out of the air, my reflexes still sharp. I opened the driver's side door and slid into the bucket seat. It felt like coming home. The leather creaked a welcome. The steering wheel felt like an extension of my own arms. Maya hopped into the passenger seat, buckling her belt and looking at me with pure excitement. I inserted the key. I turned it. The engine didn't just start. It woke up. It roared a deep baritone rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and up my spine. It was the sound of raw, unadulterated power. It was the sound of a heart that refused to stop beating. I looked at Maya. She was grinning from ear to ear. "Ready?" she asked. I shifted into first gear. "Always," I said. I eased the clutch out. The Mustang rolled forward out of the garage and into the sunlight. I hit the gas. Not too hard, just enough to let the neighbors know we were there. The tires chirped against the pavement, a short, sharp sound of defiance. We turned onto the main road. The wind rushed through the open windows, carrying away the last lingering scents of the past. I looked at the house in the rearview mirror. It stood strong and proud. The lean was gone. The fraud was gone. The parasites were gone. It was just a man and his legacy driving into the future. I pressed the pedal down. The engine howled. It wasn't a mechanical noise. It was laughter. It was the deep, booming laughter of a man who had played the long game and won. It was the sound of victory. As the speedometer climbed and the trees blurred into a green streak, I realized that Brittany was right about one thing. She had said she was helping me downsize. And she had. I had downsized the lies. I had downsized the fake relationships. I had stripped my life down to the frame and found that the steel underneath was stronger than ever. We drove toward the horizon, the engine singing its song of freedom, leaving the dust of the past far behind us where it belonged. They say that time heals all wounds, but I have found that time is actually just a building inspector. It comes around eventually to check if your foundation is solid or if you built your life on quicksand. It has been 6 months since the federal agents led Brittany out of the courtroom in handcuffs, and in that time the dust has finally settled, revealing exactly what was left standing and what needed to be bulldozed. I received a letter from the Department of Corrections last week. It was from Brittany. I didn't open it. I didn't need to read her desperate scrawled justifications or her pleas for money for the commissary. I know where she is. She is currently serving a 5-year sentence for wire fraud and identity theft. The plea bargain Vincent Thorne negotiated saved her from a 10-year stretch, but it couldn't save her from the reality of her new life. The designer dresses are gone, replaced by state-issued orange jumpsuits that don't fit. The manicures are gone. The social climbing is over. She gave birth to the baby in the prison ward, a girl. The state placed the child with a distant cousin of Julian's, a decent woman who lives on a farm in Wisconsin. I set up a small, anonymous education fund for the girl. It wasn't her fault she was born into a mess, and I wanted to make sure she had a chance to be better than her parents. But I will never meet her. Some branches of the family tree are too diseased to save. You just have to prune them and hope the wind carries the seeds elsewhere. As for Julian, he turned on Brittany the moment the handcuffs clicked. He testified against her in exchange for a reduced sentence on the construction fraud charges. He got 2 years, but his reputation is destroyed. His company was liquidated to pay the fines and the lawsuits from the other homeowners he scammed. He is a ruined man, a king of a castle made of garbage. Then there is Derek, my son. The boy I tried so hard to protect that I forgot to teach him how to fight. He took the check I gave him. He took the $15,000, the price of his loyalty, and he drove east. He ended up in Ohio working at an auto parts distribution center. He loads trucks on the night shift. It is hard, thankless work, the kind of work that breaks your back but clears your mind. He writes to me once a month. The letters arrive in plain white envelopes with no return address, just a postmark from Cleveland. Maya puts them in a shoebox in the hall closet. I haven't opened a single one. Not out of spite, but out of principle. Derek needs to learn that silence is a consequence. He needs to understand that you cannot break a man's trust and then fix it with a stamp. Maybe one day, years from now, when his hands are calloused and his back is strong from carrying his own weight, I will open that box. But not today. Today, he is learning the lesson I should have taught him when he was 12. He is learning that a man is defined by what he does when no one is watching, not by who his father is. The house is different now. It is quieter, but it is a good quiet. It is the quiet of a library or a cathedral, not the quiet of a tomb. Maya moved into the main bedroom, the one Brittany had tried to claim for herself. We painted over the beige walls with colors Maya chose, bright blues and vibrant greens. We turned the nursery that never was into a study for her. She is doing well in school. She has a sharp mind for engineering, a mind that sees how things fit together. She doesn't have time for drama. She is too busy fixing the world one broken engine at a time. We have a routine now. On Sundays we cook. I teach her the recipes my wife taught me, the gumbo, the cornbread, the collard greens. We sit at the dining table, the one Derek was too afraid to sit at, and we talk. We talk about school. We talk about cars. We talk about the future. We don't talk about the past. The past is a lesson, not a residence. This evening, the weather was perfect. The kind of evening where the sky turns a bruised purple and the air smells of cooling asphalt. I told Maya to grab her coat. We walked out to the garage and I pulled the cover off the Mustang. She still gleams under the lights, that deep night mist blue that looks like the ocean at midnight. I tossed the keys to Maya. "You drive," I said. She looked at me, her eyes wide. "But Grandpa, you said I wasn't ready." "I said you weren't ready for the horsepower," I corrected. "I didn't say you weren't ready to learn." She got in the driver's seat. Her hands were shaking a little as she adjusted the mirror, but she took a deep breath and turned the key. The engine roared to life. We drove out of the city, leaving the suburbs behind, heading west toward the hills where the road curves like a snake. I watched her hands on the wheel. She was careful. She was respectful. She listened to the engine shifting gears, not when the tachometer told her to, but when the car asked her to. We pulled over at the scenic overlook, the one that looks back over the city skyline. We got out and sat on the hood of the car, the engine ticking softly as it cooled beneath us. The metal was warm against my legs. I looked out at the lights of the city flickering on one by one. I thought about the basement. I thought about the cold tray of food. I thought about the moment the judge banged his gavel. It felt like a lifetime ago. It felt like a nightmare I had finally woken up from. "You know," Grandpa Maya said, breaking the silence, "I used to be scared of being alone. When Dad left when Brittany went to jail, I thought we were going to be lonely." I put my arm around her shoulders. "Are you lonely now?" I asked. She shook her head, leaning her head on my shoulder. "No, I feel safe." "That is the secret, Maya," I said, pointing at the horizon. "People think family is about having a full house at Thanksgiving. They think it is about having the same last name or the same nose. But that is a lie." I looked at her, seeing the strength in her face that Derek never had. "Family isn't blood," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Blood is just biology. It is an accident of birth. You can share blood with a mosquito if it bites you. That doesn't make you family." I tapped the hood of the car. "Family is the people who stay when the engine breaks down," I said. "Family is the people who don't sell you out for a quick buck. Family is respect. It is loyalty. It is the people who look at you and see a human being, not a resource." Maya nodded, understanding the weight of the words. We sat there until the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving us in the twilight. I wasn't just an old man with a nice car anymore. I was a survivor. I was a guardian. I had fought a war in my own living room, and I had won. I looked at the car, the physical manifestation of my victory. Brittany saw metal and rubber. She saw dollar signs. I saw freedom. I saw the ability to drive away from anything that tried to cage me. "Let's go home, kid," I said, sliding off the hood. "You have school tomorrow." Maya hopped into the driver's seat again. She smiled at me, a genuine smile that lit up the dashboard. "Home," she said, tasting the word. I liked the sound of that. We drove back down the mountain, the headlights cutting through the darkness. The senile old man was dead and buried. Ray Coleman was alive, and for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, in the driver's seat of my own life. Reflection from Ray Coleman. People often mistake silence for weakness and gray hair for senility. Brittany looked at me and saw an expired expiration date. She saw a resource to be mined, not a human being to be respected. That was her fatal flaw. Dignity isn't something you can strip away with a forged signature or a demolition crew. It is the steel in your spine that hardens when the world tries to bend you. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting demands, but the one quietly waiting for the right moment to strike. Never underestimate the man who built the foundation you are standing on. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us share these stories with more people who need to hear them. And I want to ask you a question. Have you ever had a family member who mistook your kindness for weakness? Let me know your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Stay strong and remember, respect is earned, never given. See you in the next video.